Chapter 1951. The leader of the disciples was enraged. He glared angrily at Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian. These two really don't know what's good for them. Wait until they enter the Heavenly Yuan sect. If they can't treat Granddance injuries, let's see what they'll do then. If they wanted to deal with them, they had plenty of ways to do so. As he thought of this, he immediately said to the disciple who had spoken rudely to Luo Qingtong, "Apologize. Senior brother." The Heavenly Yuan sect disciple's expression was very unconvinced. "I said, apologize." The leader of the Heavenly Yuan sect disciple shouted sternly. The other party actually dared to question his authority. "Yes." Hearing the anger in his voice, the Heavenly Yuan sect disciple reluctantly lowered his head and apologized to Luo Qingtong. "I was wrong just now. I'm sorry." Before he could finish speaking, Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes and looked at him. "Are you apologizing to me?" She pointed at the man beside her. "Shouldn't it be him? You?" The Heavenly Yuan sect disciple couldn't hold it in any longer. Luo Qingtong didn't stop him when he opened his mouth. Now, after he had apologized, she said that he should apologize to him. She was clearly doing it on purpose. Furthermore, Luo Qingtong was a guest invited by the Heavenly Yuan sect. He had offended her, so he naturally should apologize. But who was this man? Why should he apologize to him? This woman was clearly deliberately making things difficult for him and disgusting him. "Did I say anything wrong? Your Heavenly Yuan sect didn't say that you can't bring people along, but you casually ridiculed the people I brought along. Can't I seek justice?" Luo Qingtong looked at him coldly. Just like how Yi Qianxian had defended her, she naturally couldn't let this man suffer in front of her. Otherwise, why would she suddenly make things difficult for these people when she had barked like mad dogs? It was because in this world, only she could bully this man and make him helpless. No one else could. Whoever dared to say a word about him would pay the price. Insulting him is the same as insulting me. Luo Qingtong's eyes were cold. "Are you going to apologize?" Luo Qingtong's words made the faces of the Sky Yuan sect disciples turn even uglier. Luo Qingtong's words were too insatiable. It would be best if she could treat Great Granddance injuries. Otherwise, when they reached the Heavenly Yuan sect, they would not let them off so easily. "Apologize." The leading disciple of the Heavenly Yuan sect said coldly. He kicked the Heavenly Yuan sect disciple hard. The latter's face was full of humiliation and grievance. He lowered his head heavily and apologized to Yi Qianxian. "Young master, please, forgive me. I was rude and offended you. Please, forgive me." He said those words with great difficulty. Then, he flashed to the back of the group with an ugly expression. The group of Sky Yuan sect disciples also stared coldly at Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian. "Miss Luo, please." The leading disciple of the Sky Yuan sect said coldly to Luo Qingtong. His voice was gloomy. Luo Qingtong didn't care. Since these people didn't dare to touch her, they should behave themselves. If they were dragons, they should coil around her. If they were tigers, they should lie down. Ignoring them, Luo Qingtong pulled Yi Qianxian's hand and walked forward. Chapter 1952. Anyway, she was not in a hurry to go to the Tianyuan sect. These people just had to follow her obediently. The group of Tianyuan sect disciples' faces were extremely ugly. After following Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian for a period of time, they really could not bear it and had to humbly beg them to hurry up. After all, they were in a hurry to go back to the sect. The land of the deceased immortals was about to open. They wanted more time to improve their strength. This was really a race against time. Therefore, they had to bow their heads to Luo Qingtong. The few Tianyuan sect disciples who were the most arrogant previously, Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian, also had to bow their heads and apologize. although Luo Qingtong did not make any requests of them. Who didn't know that Luo Qingtong was deliberately making things difficult for them? The group of people could only swallow their anger and treat Luo Qingtong nicely. After returning to the sect, they would think of a way to settle the score with her. Luo Qingtong was not afraid of them. Seeing that one by one they apologized to her and Yi Qianxian, she immediately pulled Yi Qianxian and quickened their pace. The group of people did not take long to arrive at the Tianyuan sect. In the Tianyuan sect, the Grand Supreme Dean was anxiously pacing in the courtyard. He had been in this state for a few days. After hearing that Luo Qingtong had come, he immediately rushed out of his courtyard and went to the gate of the Tianyuan sect to welcome Luo Qingtong in. When he saw that Yi Qianxian had also come with her, the Grand Supreme Dean's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Oh my God! Why was Ming Zun here? Thinking of how fiercely this person protected his wife, and then thinking of the ugly faces of some people in his sect, the Grand Supreme Dean's face turned green. Hey! He quietly pulled Luo Qingtong to the side and asked, "Why did you bring him here?" This stinky girl's heart was really big. She wasn't afraid that this man would get angry and destroy his sect. The highest dean didn't have a favorable impression of some people in his own sect, otherwise he wouldn't have left the true Spill continent for so many years after his strength had plummeted. However, he was still very respectful towards his master, the sect leader of the Sky Yuan sect. Oh my God, I can't let Ming Zun destroy my sect's business. Hey, can you control your man? The Grand Supreme Dean looked at her with a bitter face and said, "At least don't let him destroy my sect." Luo Qingtong looked at him with a faint smile. If he had such thoughts, it meant that some people in his sect were really troublesome. Luo Qingtong had already seen this point from the fact that the Grand Dean didn't want to return to the sect even if he was beaten to death. He wasn't surprised. Instead, they were curious about the reason why he had returned to the sect. Let's not talk about this for now. Don't go overboard. Qianren won't do anything to you. But you. Luo Qingtong sized up the Grand Supreme Dean and asked, "Didn't you say that you didn't want to return to the hidden world even if you were beaten to death? Why did you suddenly change your mind?" Also, Luo Qingtong looked at him with a smile and said, "What about your love debt? Are you done yet?" Speaking of this, the Grand Supreme Dean's face instantly turned red. Luo Qingtong looked at the Grand Supreme Dean's face that instantly turned red from head to toe. His entire person was like a cooked shrimp, and she was dumbfounded for a moment. This person, wasn't this too exaggerated? Luo Qingtong blinked her eyes. At this moment, the Grand Supreme Dean instantly glared at her and angrily said, "None of your business." Chapter 1953. Also. Who do you think caused me to be like this? The Grand Supreme Dean was in a bad mood. If it weren't for the fact that he had to help this stinky girl at the bottom of the cliff, would he have been discovered by the sect and captured by someone? Now that things had turned out like this, it was really, this stinky girl still dared to laugh at him. Luo Qingtong looked at him speechlessly. Who was a child? Her mental age was already 18 years old, okay? But the Grand Supreme Dean's appearance, there was obviously a problem. Luo Qingtong looked at him ambiguously. The latter looked at her, and his expression became even more furious. Out of sight, out of mind, he directly pulled her inside. All right, stop being naughty. Hurry up, help me take a look at her. She transferred all her remaining strength and cultivation to me, and now the injuries in her body have worsened. Help me take a look and see if her condition can still be cured. When Luo Qingtong heard the serious matter, her expression instantly turned solemn. She then realized that the Grand Supreme Dean's strength had increased to the Holy Emperor realm during this period of time, and was close to the Holy Emperor realm. From the Grand Supreme Dean's words, it seemed that someone had transferred her strength to him. This was really true love. However, Luo Qingtong's face was filled with anger. Where on earth did you get the confidence to think that I can cure her? The other party had already transferred her strength to him, which was equivalent to dissipating her own strength, and he still wanted to save her. Save my ass. She was definitely going to be crippled, okay? No, our situation is more special. The Grand Supreme Dean's expression was awkward as he said this. Anyway, you will know when you take a look later. As he spoke, he pulled Luo Qingtong inside. Luo Qingtong didn't forget Yi Qianxian, and she pulled him inside. During this time, Yi Qianxian's expression was cold. That pair of dark and deep eyes, which were as sharp as swords, stared coldly at the hand that the Grand Principal was holding onto Luo Qingtong. Her stare made him shudder. Only then did he realize how big a mistake he had made. He hurriedly let go of Luo Qingtong's hand. Oh my God, please don't flip out, please don't flip out. He really didn't mean it. The corner of the Grand Supreme Dean's mouth twitched. He hurriedly pretended to be ignorant and continued to walk down. Along the way, he felt as if a knife was poking his back. Pooh! Luo Qingtong couldn't help laughing when she saw their interaction. When Yi Qianmin heard her laughter, she instantly snorted coldly. She raised her hand and took out a handkerchief, carefully wiping her hands. Dirty. Before he could open his mouth, Luo Qingtong had already finished for him with a smile. Yi Qianxian cast a sidelong glance at her. You know it's dirty, but you still let others touch it. Luo Qingtong looked at his eyes and laughed even harder. I know, I know. Luo Qingtong smiled and kissed the man's lips. She didn't care if there were other people around. Yi Qianxian narrowed his eyes and looked at the little woman in his arms throwing herself at him. He didn't know why, but the gloominess in his heart suddenly dissipated. He really fell into the hands of this woman in this lifetime. Yi Qianxian squeezed Luo Qingtong's soft and boneless hands. He snorted coldly in his heart, but there was an indescribable sweetness that penetrated the heart and spread in his heart. Cunning. He snorted softly and turned around to pull her into his arms, holding her tightly in his arms. Chapter 1954. Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian followed the Grand Supreme Dean into a courtyard. In a room in the courtyard, a pale but dignified and beautiful woman was lying on the bed. The woman's face was elegant but her eyes seemed to hide a sharpness. At this moment, when she saw the Grand Supreme Dean and Luo Qingtong walking in, she said coldly, "What are you doing here again? Didn't I ask you to leave?" Her voice was cold but the Grand Supreme Dean smiled bitterly. How would he dare to leave? After eating her up, she even sucked away her cultivation. If he were to leave, would he still be human? That was too ungrateful of him. Especially when this person was not just anyone but his master's beloved daughter. His junior sister who was his childhood sweetheart. Why would I leave? Junior sister, you must be joking. Ha ha ha, the Grand Supreme Dean laughed dryly. However, the woman lying on the bed did not appreciate it at all. Humph, if I didn't stop you, you would have run away when I brought you back to the sect. What's the use of saying all this now? Bai Suqing's face was cold. She had waited for this stinky man for so many years but he had refused to come back to see her. Even when she sensed that he had used the power of the golden light shield to bring him back to the sect, he still wanted to run away. If he hadn't appeared, and if he hadn't found out that he had the same injuries as him, and felt guilty, he might have run away again. The reason why she was so attentive was because she had drugged him and forced herself on him. She had sucked the last of his hidden injuries into her body and transferred the last of her strength to him. Otherwise, how could this man be so obedient? Wouldn't he have run away long ago? Bai Suqing's face was cold and her sharp eyes did not even want to look at the Grand Supreme Dean. If you want to leave, then leave. Don't be an eyesore here. I didn't do all this for you. You don't have to be so attentive. Junior sister, the bitter smile on the Grand Supreme Dean's face became more obvious. He didn't expect his junior sister to be so extreme. He and Bai Suqing were childhood sweethearts. Back then, he was injured in that place, causing his cultivation to plummet. No matter how hard he tried, he was unable to recover. He had already been confirmed by many alchemists in the hidden world that he would never be able to recover his cultivation in this lifetime. Under such circumstances, he naturally could not implicate his master and junior sister and allow others to mock the heavenly Yuan sect's chief disciple for being a cripple who could not grow any stronger. He endured the pain and left. For so many years, he had been trying to avoid being found by the Sky Yuan sect. He did it so that Bai Suqing could forget about him and find a better husband. Who would have thought that after he was injured, Bai Suqing also went to that place and came back with the same injuries as him. Coincidentally, he had already left at that time, so he didn't know about this at all. Otherwise, he would have stopped him. And a few days ago, after he was captured and brought back to the sect, she even drugged him and passed the last of her cultivation and strength to him through dual cultivation. Now, the hidden dangers in his body were all gone, and he had reached the level of strength that he should have reached before he was injured. However, Bai Suqing's body was in a mess. Chapter 1955. It was also because of Sky Yuan sect's deep foundation that they used all kinds of treasures and precious herbs to protect Bai Suqing. Otherwise, she would have become a cripple long ago. She accepted the other party's deep affection and even took advantage of him. How could the Grand Supreme Dean have any confidence in front of Bai Suqing? Back then, he left because he liked Bai Suqing and did not want to hold her back. After so many years, he had never forgotten her. But in order not to ruin her future life and to prevent others from using his injuries and strength to attack his master, he did not return to the sect for so many years. Now that things had turned out like this, he would not have run away. The Grand Supreme Dean was depressed. Then, he thought of Luo Qingtong and quickly pulled her over. "Junior sister, don't be angry. I know that I was wrong in the past. I will change in the future. Look, this is the evil doctor that I told you about previously. She was the one who cured my injuries. Quickly let her take a look at your injuries. After she has cured your injuries, we will get married. In the future, I will not go anywhere except by your side. Okay?" The Grand Supreme Dean was almost coaxing the girl in front of him. Bai Suqing had done so much for him. In the past, he did not know about it. Now that he knew, he would not leave her side even if he was chased away. He only hoped that the other party would not be angry and let Luo Qingtong take a look at her injuries. After all, treatment required the other party's cooperation. Otherwise, even if Luo Qingtong had a way, it would be useless. When Bai Suqing heard this, she immediately raised her head and looked at Luo Qingtong. "You are his student? You have cured his injuries?" Although she was still angry with the Grand Supreme Dean, after hearing that Luo Qingtong had cured his injuries, she looked at Luo Qingtong with gentleness in her eyes. Her expression was not as cold as when she was facing the Grand Supreme Dean. Yes. Luo Qingtong had been watching from the side for a while. When she saw Bai Suqing looking at her, her expression was gentle and her voice was gentle. He knew that the other party's previous coldness towards the Grand Principal was probably due to a fit of pique. In reality, the other party was still very concerned about him. Who would have thought that the Grand Supreme Dean would have such a soulmate in the Heaven Yuan sect? No wonder Qianren said that it was difficult for him to repay the debt of love, and when she asked him to come with her to the hidden world, he also looked like he would rather die than agree. It seemed that a lot of things had happened in the Sky Yuan sect. That was why the Grand Supreme Dean had made such a 180-degree change. Luo Qingtong thought of the expression of the Grand Dean, which was like a cooked shrimp, and suddenly smiled. She nodded at Bai Suqing and said, "I'm Luo Qingtong." "Hello." Bai Suqing nodded at her. She was also very curious about this student that the Grand Supreme Dean had mentioned. The other party was actually the person who had healed his injuries. He didn't expect the other party to be so young. One really couldn't judge a book by its cover. Bai Suqing would not doubt the words of the Grand Supreme Dean. The other party would not harm her. Therefore, this young girl should really be that powerful. When the two of them were talking, the Grand Supreme Dean, who was beside them, was already a little anxious. All right. The two of you can talk later. Evil doctor, quickly help me take a look at her. Is her condition serious? If. Chapter 1956. What the Grand Supreme Dean was thinking was to absorb the violent energy in Bai Suqing's body back into his own body and transfer his strength to Bai Suqing. Anyway, he had been a half-cripple for so long. It did not matter. But Bai Suqing could not. He had to let her live well. Cough. When Luo Qingtong heard what the Grand Supreme Dean said, she suddenly coughed violently. It turned out that the Grand Supreme Dean's strength came from dual cultivation. It was no wonder that his face was as red as a cooked prawn. Bai Suqing, who was beside him, blushed. She grabbed a pillow at the side and threw it at him. Get out of here. What nonsense are you talking about? Moreover, he did it in front of two juniors. Bai Suqing's face was flushed red. Her pale face regained some color. She glanced at Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian. Cough, the Grand Supreme Dean's face was also a little embarrassed. However, for Bai Suqing's sake, he could not care so much. Little kid, can you do it? He urged Luo Qingtong. Grand Supreme Dean, let me finish the treatment first. Luo Qingtong looked at him. She really had to hand it to him. Oh. Look. As the Grand Supreme Dean spoke, he quickly stood aside obediently. As for Luo Qingtong, she was carefully checking Bai Suqing's body. She transferred a trace of her aura into Bai Suqing's body. Following the flow of her aura, it circulated in her body. At the same time, she activated her pupil technique. When she lowered her head slightly, she had already seen the situation in Bai Suqing's body. The latter's condition was very bad. The violent energy was exactly the same as the energy in the Grand Supreme Dean's body previously. However, the Grand Supreme Dean's energy was suppressed by his energy. As for Bai Suqing's body, she had transferred all the energy in her body to the Grand Supreme Dean. As a result, her body did not have the slightest resistance in the face of the violent invasion of the energy. If it weren't for the numerous treasures and precious medicinal herbs of the Heavenly Yuan Sect, Bai Suqing's body would have been completely destroyed by the violent energy. But even so, her condition was not optimistic. The violent energy had already destroyed many of her meridians and was now approaching her dantian. If this continued, Bai Suqing would become a cripple sooner or later. This power occupied her dantian and meridians, turning her body into a huge magnetic storm. At that time, even if she managed to get rid of the energy, her body would still be destroyed. How is it? Evil doctor baby? The Grand Supreme Dean looked at her nervously. No. Luo Qingtong opened her eyes. Hearing this, the Grand Supreme Dean's eyelids twitched. No? He said in disbelief, you mean, she can't be cured? The Grand Supreme Dean was unable to accept this result. Evil doctor, take a good look again. Take a good look. The Grand Supreme Dean was really anxious this time. Previously, he had been holding on to the hope that Luo Qingtong could cure him. After all, she had cured his internal injuries. Although Bai Suqing's condition was a little serious, it was not like she had no chance. However, at this moment, Luo Qingtong's no made his entire body go limp. No. Chapter 1957. It's not that she can't be treated, but your dual cultivation method won't work. Even if you transfer your strength back to her, it won't be of much use. Bai Suqing's meridians had been destroyed a lot. Even if the Grand Supreme Dean transferred his strength back to her, she wouldn't be able to circulate it and resist the violent power. What should I do then? The Grand Supreme Dean was embarrassed when he heard that. However, he quickly reacted and hurriedly asked. Prepare a private chamber for me. All of you stay outside and don't let anyone come near. I'll treat her then. This was the Tianyuan sect. Although Luo Qingtong trusted the Grand Supreme Dean, it didn't mean that she trusted everyone here. She wanted to treat Bai Suqing, so she couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Of course, she didn't want anyone to peek at her pupil technique. All right. The Grand Supreme Dean agreed without hesitation and immediately left to make preparations. At this moment, the door outside was pushed open and a group of people walked in. Nonsense. A man in the Tianyuan sect's senior elder robe said coldly, "Eldest senior brother, is this the disciple you found to treat junior sister's injury?" As he spoke, he glanced at Luo Qingtong with disdain. "You're just a girl who's still wet behind the ears. How dare you say that? Even if you want your disciple to enter the sect, you don't have to use such a clumsy method, right? What if junior sister's injury worsens because of your torment? She's already done enough for you. If you still have a conscience, don't joke about her life." The Grand Supreme Dean was furious when he heard that. "Chen Tong, what did you say? What do you mean?" The Grand Supreme Dean was furious. How could he joke about junior sister's life? In this world, the only person who could treat Bai Suqing was Luo Qingtong, who had also treated him. These people didn't know anything. What nonsense were they talking about? Humph, am I not clear enough? Chen Tong snorted coldly. This is the Heavenly Yuan sect, not a place where you can cause trouble. Eldest senior brother, I've already been very tolerant of you because of my previous attitude. Now, I can't let you do whatever you want just because junior sister likes you. All of you, descend the mountain immediately. Leave the Heavenly Yuan sect. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite and attacking you." His voice was cold as he looked at the Grand Supreme Dean with disdain. What ability did the other party have? More than 10 years ago, his cultivation had plummeted, making him a half-cripple. If it wasn't for Bai Suqing transferring her last bit of cultivation to him, he wouldn't even be qualified to talk to him. What right did he have to yell in front of him? He thought about how he had guarded Bai Suqing for so long, all for the sake of marrying her and inheriting the Heavenly Yuan sect. In the end, the moment the Grand Dean returned, he messed up his plans. After hearing the news that the two of them were together, Chen Tong even had the urge to kill the Grand Supreme Dean. He had purposely asked the Grand Supreme Dean to invite Luo Qingtong to the sect so that he could have a legitimate reason to chase them down the mountain and completely destroy the Grand Supreme Dean's desire to stay in the Sky Yuan sect in the future. The sect would be his in the future and could only be his. Chapter 1958. You. Chen Tong, how dare you? The Grand Supreme Dean panicked. He did not have to stay in the Sky Yuan sect. If that was the case, he would not have left in the first place. However, this was the time when Bai Suqing needed treatment. From Luo Qingtong's words, the Grand Supreme Dean could feel that although Bai Suqing's condition could be treated, it was already very dangerous. If they were chased away by Chen Tong, Bai Suqing's treatment would be delayed and her condition would worsen in the future. How could he face her? Moreover, Bai Suqing had feelings for him and had done so much for him. If he left just like that, how could he face her? Since he had promised Bai Suqing that he would not leave her side for the rest of his life. "Chen Tong, you are not qualified to chase me away," he said coldly. Although he had left the Sky Yuan sect, his name was not removed from the Sky Yuan sect. What right did Chen Tong have to chase him away? Humph. Of course, I was not qualified in the past. However, Chen Tong sneered at the Grand Supreme Dean and said, "You have left the Sky Yuan sect for so many years and have not contributed at all to the sect. Now, you are joking about junior sister's health for your own student. For junior sister, I can only chase you away. Even if I have to bear the reputation of chasing senior brother away, I will not hesitate. So, senior brother. Zhu Yi, please leave. Lest I get someone to throw you out. At that time, it will not look good on everyone. Don't you think so? Before the Grand Supreme Dean could speak, Bai Suqing had already shouted angrily, Chen Tong, don't go overboard. I will make the decision on my own matters. They are my guests. It is not up to you to decide whether they stay or leave. Bai Suqing was also angered by Chen Tong this time. She had finally caught the Grand Supreme Dean and made him change his mind so that he was willing to stay by her side. However, Chen Tong had to interfere. She knew what he had been planning all this time. For so many years, he had been coveting the Sky Yuan sect and wanted to get his hands on her. He had wanted to lay his hands on her several times, but she had seen through him. Back then, when Zhu Yi was in danger in the land of the fallen immortals, his strength had plummeted. Did she not know who was behind it? Back then, Zhu Yi had said that he had received news that she was in danger there, so he had rushed over and ended up injured there. But in reality, she wasn't at that place at all, and she didn't send him any news. So where did he get the information from? After Zhu Yi left, Chen Tong quickly improved his strength and became the new first disciple of the Tianyuan sect through the resources he was given. Was there really no connection between the two of them? Bai Suqing did not believe it at all. However, she couldn't find any evidence to prove that Chen Tong had done anything to Zhu Yi back then. Seeing that he actually wanted to chase the Grand Principal down the mountain, he immediately became angry. She sat up angrily. However, Chen Tong's expression did not change at all. Junior sister, you're wrong. I'm doing this for your sake. You've been bewitched by Zhu Yi. You'd rather risk your body to pave the way for his student. But I can't watch you humiliate yourself like this. This bitch, she had been indifferent to my pursuit for so many years and had been waiting for Zhu Yi. Chapter 1959. These 2B** cheese had planned it well. The zither and the zither were in perfect harmony. How joyful! But what about all the years of lying low and enduring? Today, he was going to cut off all their thoughts. He was going to let them know that there was no place for them in the Sky Yuan sect. It was good that Bai Suqing had ruined her body for Zhu Yi. In this way, the entire Sky Yuan sect could only rely on him in order to pass on the mantle. As the first disciple of the Sky Yuan sect, even if Bai Suqing was not willing to marry him, for the future of the Sky Yuan sect, this position could only be passed on to him. The premise was to get rid of Zhu Yi, this scourge. Then, he would find an opportunity to get rid of all future troubles. Chen Tong's eyes were filled with ruthlessness as he ignored Bai Suqing's voice. She had allowed him to find an opportunity to take action. In that case, he could not be blamed for making a fuss. Zhu Yi could only blame himself for being insatiable. Not only did he return to the sect, but he also wanted to bring his students along. Bringing one was not enough and he wanted to bring another one. Did he really think that the Sky Yuan sect was a garbage shelter? Chen Tong sneered and asked his men to chase after the Grand Supreme Dean and Luo Qingtong. Looking at their actions, a cold glint flashed across Yi Qianren's eyes. At this moment, Luo Qingtong's voice rang out. What if I cure Master's wife's injury? Luo Qingtong held Yi Qianxian's hand and gently moved it in his palm, telling him not to take action. After all, this was the Grand Supreme Dean's sect. There was no need to start a feud with the other party because of one or two pieces of trash and scum. It would also put the Grand Supreme Dean in a difficult position. She looked at the arrogant Sky Yuan sect elder with a playful expression. She could see that the other party and the Grand Supreme Dean did not get along well. He was waiting for her to be invited to the Sky Yuan sect just to make things difficult for the Grand Supreme Dean at this moment. It was no wonder that the Grand Supreme Dean wanted to invite her over to treat Bai Suqing. It was fine that the Grand Supreme Dean and the Sky Yuan sect master did not object, but the others were also harmonious and did not have the slightest objection. So this was what they were waiting for. Luo Qingtong's lips were full of smiles. She knew that her reputation wasn't so great that a first-rate sect would lower themselves to invite her. Of course, it would be this big soon. At the very least, it would leave a deep impression on these people. Huh, with just you? Chen Tong looked at Luo Qingtong with disdain. Playing hard to get is not good enough. Did Zhu Yi teach you that? Did he think that this would be enough to trick him into relenting? Chen Tong also heard Zhu Yi call Luo Qingtong an evil doctor. However, he never thought that Luo Qingtong could save Bai Suqing. In his opinion, the Grand Supreme Dean's injuries were due to luck. Now, he wanted to use this opportunity to curry favor with Bai Suqing. The latter adored him wholeheartedly, so whatever he said was right. Naturally, she believed him without a doubt. At that time, the Grand Supreme Dean could just make up an excuse that he didn't succeed. What evil doctor? What treatment? It was just a trick to deceive people. This pair of master and disciple, as they talked, even they themselves believed it to be true. Or, they deliberately used this trick to trick him, so that he had to give in and bow his head. However, Bai Suqing's injuries were not as bad as Zhu Yi's. Chapter 1960. Many alchemists in the hidden world had seen it. There was absolutely no way to save her. Even if Zhu Yi had the same luck as before, it was impossible to save Bai Suqing. If not for this, he wouldn't have been so anxious before. These two people wanted to trick him? No way. Chen Tong sneered at Luo Qingtong and didn't want to pay attention to her. He raised his hand to let the people around him continue. Luo Qingtong looked at him and said indifferently, "What's wrong?" Elder Chen doesn't dare to answer. Is it because of a guilty conscience? I'm afraid that I really cured Master's wife's injury, but you don't want her to be cured. That's why you want to drive us away. As soon as these words came out, Chen Tong looked at Luo Qingtong with a malicious gaze. Bai Suqing also said coldly at this time, "That's right. Chen Tong, you deliberately didn't let them treat my injury. When my father comes out of seclusion, I will tell him that it was you who caused my cultivation to be wasted." This bitch. Chen Tong's face was gloomy. The other party was clearly preparing to let him take the blame. If he drove Zhu Yi and the others away, he would also bear the crime of causing her to be wasted. In this way, he would get rid of Zhu Yi and the others, but he wouldn't get any benefits. Thinking of this, Chen Tong's heart was furious to the extreme. Good. He was so angry that he laughed and looked at Luo Qingtong and the others, "Since you keep saying that you can cure Junior Sister, then I'll give you a chance. Let you treat Junior Sister's injuries. If you cure her, I will naturally apologize to you. But if you can't..." He sneered at Luo Qingtong and said, "Then you can wait for the Sky Yuan Sect to punish you. Our Sky Yuan Sect is not a place where people can fool us." His face was gloomy. Didn't they want to trick him and force him to give in? Fine, he would take a step back. Let's see how they deal with this. They were too inexperienced to deal with him. Chen Tong sneered and looked at Luo Qingtong, "How about it? If you agree, then stay here and I won't say a word. But if you don't agree..." He sneered, "Then get out of the Sky Yuan Sect." Hearing this, Luo Qingtong smiled. She was still thinking about how to force Chen Tong to agree to the bet, but she didn't expect him to bring it up himself. Were they really that impatient to deal with the Grand Principal and them? Luo Qingtong's lips curled into a smile, which was indescribably evil and enchanting. "All right." She nodded. "If you can't cure us, we'll be at your mercy. However, if we were to cure you, wouldn't an apology be too light for you?" As she spoke, she raised her eyebrows and said, "If I cure Master's wife, then you will also be at her and the Grand Principal's disposal. How about it?" The grudges of the Grand Supreme Dean were naturally left to him to deal with. Luo Qingtong had helped him to this point. All right. Chen Tong sneered. Then I'll be waiting for you. The other party's tone was really arrogant. Unfortunately, no matter what she said, he wouldn't take back his words. He was waiting to see how they would deal with this. Chen Tong left with his own people. In the room, the Grand Supreme Dean looked at Luo Qingtong and frowned. Little child, you're boasting like this. What if something unexpected happens? He looked worried, not because he was worried that Luo Qingtong couldn't cure by Suqing, but because he was afraid that an accident would implicate Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianming. Chapter 1961. With their previous words, Chen Tong could use the power of Sky Yuan Sect to deal with Luo Qingtong. At that time, even if Yi Qianming resisted, the Grand Supreme Dean would feel uneasy if he inexplicably attracted such an enemy for Luo Qingtong. Sigh, it's all my fault. If he had known earlier, he would have quietly brought Luo Qingtong and the others over. But this was unrealistic because Chen Tong had been watching him. The Grand Supreme Dean felt depressed thinking about it. At this time, Bai Suqing frowned and said coldly, "What are you afraid of? Do you still have a future? Your student stood up for you and you're still afraid of this and that. So what if I can't cure her? I'll insist that I'll be cured. What can he do to me?" Bai Suqing said coldly, "Anyway, my father should be out of seclusion by then. Don't worry. Little Qingtong, I won't let them touch you," she said resolutely. Luo Qingtong found it funny. Master's wife agreed so easily because she was planning to renege on the debt. But Luo Qingtong wasn't going to let the other party renege on the debt. "Don't worry, Master's wife, I'm confident." Luo Qingtong knew that Bai Suqing was still worried about her medical skills. After all, her injury was much more serious than the Grand Supreme Dean. Moreover, the situation was much more dangerous. But for Luo Qingtong, as long as Bai Suqing's body wasn't crippled, there was still hope. If she was really crippled by the violent power in her body, then there was no other way. Okay. Bai Suqing's character was very straightforward. After hearing that Luo Qingtong said that there was no problem, she agreed decisively. Then let them prepare quickly. Don't feel burdened. It doesn't matter if I can't cure her. I know my own body very well. Bai Suqing thought it through. When she transferred her strength to the Grand Supreme Dean, she was already prepared to be crippled. So it was a surprise that Luo Qingtong could cure her. If it couldn't be cured, she wouldn't force it. In short, she wouldn't let anything happen to Luo Qingtong and the others. Chen Tong and the others, don't even think about touching them. Luo Qingtong listened to her words and smiled. She didn't say anything and just let the Grand Principal and the others prepare. At that time, she would naturally give them a big gift. The Grand Principal quickly found a secret room. Yi Qianming and the Grand Principal stood guard outside. With a man around, Luo Qingtong naturally treated Bai Suqing without worry. "Mistress, listen to my command." "Close your eyes," Luo Qingtong said to Bai Suqing. The latter did as he was told. When Chen Tong heard that Luo Qingtong and the rest had found a secret room to treat Bai Suqing, he sneered. "It's actually quite decent. That way, it will be easier to find an excuse, right?" Chen Tong felt that he had already seen through Luo Qingtong and the Grand Principal. His pair of rather handsome eyes narrowed slightly as he coldly said to the people beside him, "Go. Call all the elders of the peaks and the inner yard over. Tell them that I have something to ask them to witness. It's a big matter of our Sky Yuan sect. Tell them to come." Yes. The disciples received the order and immediately left to pass on the orders to the various peaks and the inner yard. Chapter 1962. However, Chen Tong was the chief disciple of the current sect leader of the Tian Yuan sect. They naturally had to give him some face. After all, if there was no accident, the sect leader of the Tian Yuan sect would be Chen Tong in the future. However, some people still guessed that this matter might be related to the Grand Supreme Dean who was brought back to the sect leader. Sai, I heard that Zhu Yi was found by Bai Suqing and brought back to the sect. Chen Tong wouldn't come to us for this matter, right? An elder said. It's not impossible. Another elder said at this time, when Zhu Yi was still alive, Chen Tong always wanted to surpass him. After that, Zhu Yi had an accident in the land of the fallen immortals. It was said that it was an accident, but who doesn't know that that place is a forbidden area that everyone knows? If it was really an accident, then how stupid is Zhu Yi? Isn't that so? Many of the elders gathered together and said. However, Bai Suqing didn't have any evidence back then, let alone them. They just gathered together and casually gossiped. When Chen Tong brought them to the place where Bai Suqing was treated and saw the Grand Supreme Dean and others guarding outside, they immediately understood in their hearts. Sure enough, it was for Zhu Yi. Sai, this Chen Tong was really unwilling to give up until he killed Zhu Yi. The crowd looked at the secret room behind the Grand Supreme Dean and others and vaguely knew what was going on. When they heard Chen Tong's explanation, they were even more clear. Sai, this Zhu Yi, should I call him stupid or stupid? For so many years, he couldn't beat Chen Tong and now he's being led by the nose. Chen Tong is clearly looking for an opportunity to kill them. That's right. Previously, when he asked them to go down the mountain, he just went down the mountain. Although it's not very good on his face, at least he saved his life. Why is he so stubborn with Chen Tong? Great, now that Chen Tong has gotten hold of his weakness, he absolutely won't let him off. That's right. A group of elders shook their heads. None of them were optimistic about the Grand Supreme Dean and Luo Qingtong. Not for anything else, but it was true that the Grand Supreme Dean's injury was cured. They were also very surprised in their hearts. After all, the injury in that place had never been cured before. But that was only the Grand Supreme Dean. Moreover, whether it was his student who cured it was still uncertain. They had heard from the disciples around them that the girl was only 15 or 16 years old. How could she have such amazing medical skills at such a young age? Most likely, it was due to some kind of accident. Such cases were not unheard of in the hidden world. But such a coincidence, it could not be repeated. Not to mention that Bai Suqing's condition was much more serious than the Grand Supreme Dean's. She was basically a cripple, how could she be cured? The group of elders shook their heads continuously. They felt that the Grand Dean and his students would not be able to escape this calamity. The Grand Supreme Dean might be able to escape, but his student. Sai. The Grand Supreme Sect's immortals. When the Grand Dean saw the group of Heavenly Yuan sect elders that Chen Tong had brought, his face instantly darkened. How could he not know what Chen Tong was planning? He was afraid that they would not fulfill their promise, so he had deliberately invited all the elders of the Sky Yuan sect to come. Chapter 1963. The other party was really scheming and vicious. Senior brother. Chen Tong's face was full of arrogance and hypocrisy. I've thought about it. The agreement with all of you back then was too frivolous and informal. It's inevitable that there will be some disputes in the future. That won't be good. Of course, that wouldn't be respectful enough. Now, I've invited the elders of the various peaks and the elders of the inner yard to be witnesses. When the time comes, it'll be clear who's right and who's wrong. We don't have to be afraid of anyone slandering us behind our backs. Don't you think that makes sense? He smiled and looked at the Grand Supreme Dean. If you say so, then so be it. The Grand Supreme Dean's eyes were cold, and he was holding back his anger. He clearly wanted to kill them, but he was still pretending to be hypocritical. It was really disgusting. Evil doctor, you have to work hard. After treating her injuries, come out and shut this bastard up. The Grand Supreme Dean was full of anger and looked at Chen Tong coldly. "All right, we'll do as we said. If my student can treat junior sister's injuries, you'll be at our disposal. If he can't treat her, then I'll be at your disposal." "Great. Senior brother is indeed a straightforward person." Chen Tong laughed out loud with a complacent expression. He looked at the elders around him and said, "Elders, did you hear what my senior brother said? I didn't force him to say it. He said it voluntarily. Please be a witness. When the time comes, if Master comes out of seclusion, I'll have an explanation to him." Chen Tong sneered and looked as if victory was in his hands. When the elders heard that, they looked at the Grand Supreme Dean and sighed. "Sigh, this Zhu Yi." Yes, we all heard it. Everyone was invited here, and the Grand Supreme Dean had clearly mentioned the bet with Chen Tong in front of them. They couldn't possibly pretend that they didn't hear it, right? When they heard that, they immediately nodded. Chen Tong was very satisfied and waited for Luo Qingtong to finish treating Bai Suqing. Of course, he was waiting for Luo Qingtong to fail. In his opinion, it was impossible for Luo Qingtong to treat Bai Suqing successfully. In the secret chamber. After Luo Qingtong asked Bai Suqing to close her eyes, she completely released her pupil technique. Buzz! The blood-red pupils in her eyes spun violently. Two incomparably deep eyes were rotating violently as a boundless blood-red color instantly spread in all directions. Her entire pupils were dyed a blood-red color. As Luo Qingtong's pupil technique was activated, the situation inside Bai Suqing's body appeared in Luo Qingtong's eyes. This included where the energy accumulated the most, where the energy was the strongest, and where the energy was the weakest. If he wanted to clear it, which route should he start from? Everything was reflected in her eyes. It was a piece of cake for Luo Qingtong to get rid of these forces. After all, she had already done a similar treatment on the Grand Supreme Dean before. Even if Bai Suqing's condition was more serious than the Grand Supreme Dean's, it was not difficult for Luo Qingtong to do it again. Even if someone was doing a math problem, you already knew how to solve a problem. Even if you slightly changed the type of problem and increased the difficulty, it would only take a little more effort. Chapter 1964. However, Luo Qingtong did not intend to only remove the energy in Bai Suqing's body. After all, if she only wanted to remove the energy, there was no need for the Grand Dean to specially prepare a secret chamber for her. This was because it would not take much time for her to remove the energy, and there was no danger of her pupil technique being discovered. What she wanted to do was another thing that was beyond everyone's expectations. It was also a huge gift that she wanted to give to the Grand Dean and Bai Suqing. Buzz! The pupil technique in Luo Qingtong's eyes was rotating. Her eyes were also analyzing the nature of the energy in Bai Suqing's body. These violent energies were broken down into countless components in Luo Qingtong's eyes. Luo Qingtong was comparing the nature of their energy with Bai Suqing's energy. Countless numbers of data flashed past Luo Qingtong's eyes. Streams of data were constantly being exchanged and extracted. Soon, Luo Qingtong locked onto the part of the violent energies that was similar to Bai Suqing's energy. Swoosh! Luo Qingtong's eyes were filled with a bloody light in an instant. She pointed her finger out. At this moment, Bai Suqing saw that she did not move and thought that she was nervous and afraid. She immediately said, "Little Qingtong, don't worry, Before she could finish her sentence, Luo Qingtong's hand had already pointed at her back. In an instant, the young girl's energy rushed into Bai Suqing's body without any reservation. Boom! Those energies in Bai Suqing's body instantly sensed an external invasion. How could those energies, who had already treated Bai Suqing's body as their territory, tolerate the invasion of Luo Qingtong's energy? Immediately, all the energies were automatically mobilized and attacked Luo Qingtong's energy. Little Qingtong, you? Bai Suqing was shocked. She closed her eyes tightly and listened to Luo Qingtong's order. However, she was extremely nervous. She did not expect Luo Qingtong's action to be so intense. Bai Suqing originally thought that Luo Qingtong would slowly probe her energy into her body, explore the energy, and then slowly guide it to remove it. She did not expect her action to be so intense that she directly poured her energy into her body. She would be attacked by those violent energies. By then, even Luo Qingtong might be affected. She was so anxious that she wanted to open her eyes. However, before she could do anything, her mouth opened. Her lips parted in shock, filled with disbelief and bewilderment. Buzz! After Luo Qingtong's energy entered Bai Suqing's body, Luo Qingtong, her energy, she was surrounded by all the energies. All the violent energy in Bai Suqing's body was stirred up by her and rushed towards the place where her energy was. Luo Qingtong's eyes to Luo Qingtong's. She was not to Luo Qingtong's twos to Luo Qingtong's. Boom! Luo Qingtong's eye technique had already mapped out a complete route to reach Bai Suqing's dantian the moment her power entered her body. Luo Qingtong's power swept towards Bai Suqing's dantian almost unimpeded. Behind her was a long string of violent energy from Bai Suqing's body. Rumble. Chapter 1965. Boom! Just as Luo Qingtong's power was about to reach Bai Suqing's dantian, she suddenly turned around and welcomed the violent power that was rushing towards her. Mistress, circulate your energy in your dantian and circulate your energy. Luo Qingtong's voice resounded in the outside world. At the same time, the energy that entered Bai Suqing's body collided with the violent energy. Bai Suqing subconsciously obeyed her order and circulated her energy in her dantian to circulate her energy. However, her energy had already been transferred to the Grand Supreme Dean through dual cultivation. How could she still circulate her energy? While she was confused, she suddenly felt a wave of energy coming out from her body. The energy came out from her meridians. It came from the place where Luo Qingtong's energy collided with the violent energy. After Luo Qingtong's energy collided with the violent energy was suddenly split into two. One part of the energy and Luo Qingtong's energy offset each other. As for the other part of the power, it had become her power. It was indeed her energy. Bai Suqing was surprised. She could sense that the nature of this energy was exactly the same as the nature of her own energy. Luo Qingtong had converted the violent energy into her own energy? Bai Suqing was indescribably shocked. At this moment, her dantian started to circulate due to her subconscious action. She absorbed the energy from her meridians into her dantian. It was actually circulating in her dantian without any obstruction. Then, it was released again. Following the circulation of her aura, it continued to circulate in her meridians. That violent energy had actually become her own energy. Bai Suqing's heart was filled with wonder. Luo Qingtong was pouring her energy into Bai Suqing's dantian to separate and dissolve the energy in Bai Suqing's body. She did not know where the energy came from. It was very overbearing and violent and could not be extinguished for a long time. It was also because Luo Qingtong had the eye technique that could perfectly separate the energy from Bai Suqing's meridians. Otherwise, it could not be removed. Not to mention transforming it into the nature of Bai Suqing's power. Luo Qingtong's dojitsu had also recently leveled up, giving her this ability. Before she had treated the Grand Supreme Dean's injuries, she did not possess such an ability. Of course, he didn't have that kind of strength. The level of these berserk energies was extremely high. Otherwise, with Bai Suqing's status as the daughter of the Sky Yuan sect leader, she would not have been able to remove it. After all, if the sect leader of the Heavenly Yuan sect were to take action, he should be able to succeed. The only thing he could be sure of was that this violent energy was even stronger than the Heavenly Yuan sect masters. Luo Qingtong could already vaguely guess where the injuries of the Grand Principal and the others came from. Aside from the land of the fallen immortals, where else in the hidden world could be stronger than a holy sovereign? The injuries of the Grand Supreme Dean and Bai Suqing should be from the land of the deceased immortals. Furthermore, it shouldn't be an ordinary place. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes. She patiently broke down the violent energy in Bai Suqing's body. The speed of her breaking down was very slow. After all, the level of these energies was very high. It was also because these energies had broken roots in Bai Suqing's body and there was no source to support them. The more she broke them down, the less they would be. Chapter 1966. Buzz. As Luo Qingtong broke down the violent power, Luo Qingtong's eyes lit up. Bai Suqing absorbed more and more energy. Because the energy stayed in her body for a long time, it was very compatible with her body. After it was converted into her energy, it was immediately accepted by her dantian and body. The energy in Bai Suqing's body circulated very quickly. After the violent energy was decomposed by Luo Qingtong, the blocked and damaged meridians in her body were also cleared out. Her energy circulated in them and soon, they were slowly repaired. As her power increased and Luo Qingtong broke down more and more of the violent power, a virtuous cycle was forming in her body. Finally, after Luo Qingtong decomposed and eliminated the last trace of violent energy in her body, boom! Bai Suqing's body suddenly erupted with an extremely powerful energy fluctuation. In an instant, boom boom boom. In her body, her strength was rapidly increasing. From almost becoming a cripple, it was rapidly increasing. Boom boom boom. In Bai Suqing's body, the energy was surging like a thunderstorm. Her strength was constantly increasing. Soon, she broke through to the Holy Emperor realm. And it was still increasing. Finally, she reached the Holy Emperor realm. After the violent energy in her body was decomposed, not only did she return to her original strength, but she also increased by one level. And when the energy in Bai Suqing's body was surging like thunder, outside the secret chamber, Chen Tong and the others seemed to have sensed some movement. In an instant, he stood up. Humph. Seems like she failed. Chen Tong sneered. How could there be such a sound like thunder when the energy was breaking through in an ordinary treatment? Although it was not clear from outside, there was no doubt that there was a problem inside. In Chen Tong's opinion, it was most likely that Luo Qingtong tried to draw out the energy in Bai Suqing's body and failed, causing the movement. I already said that Bai Suqing's injury is incurable. The master and disciple insisted on showing off their ability. Now it's fine, right? The smile at the corner of Chen Tong's lips was cold. He said to the Grand Dean, who was also bewildered, "Senior brother, you also sensed the commotion earlier, right? I'm afraid your student has failed inside. Now, what else do you want to say to me? Fulfill your promise." Chen Tong sneered. "Of course, you better pray that junior sister is fine. Otherwise, all of you will have to pay with your lives. Also, senior brother, you have to accept your loss. How dare you joke around with junior sister's life? From now on, don't call yourself a member of the Sky Yuan Sect. Our heavenly Yuan Sect doesn't have a disciple like you." You. The Grand Supreme Dean clenched his fists tightly. However, compared to teaching Chen Tong a lesson, he was more worried about the situation in the secret chamber. Why was there such a strong commotion coming from inside? And from the looks of it, it seemed to be a sign of a breakthrough. However, there were only Luo Qingtong and Bai Suqing in this secret chamber. The commotion caused by Luo Qingtong's breakthrough was not that big, but it could not be Bai Suqing's breakthrough, right? Did she really fail? The Grand Supreme Dean's heart was burning with anxiety. Behind him, Yi Qianxian raised his eyebrows. With his strength, he was naturally more sensitive than the rest of the people present. The energy inside clearly belonged to Bai Suqing. Chapter 1967. Yi Qianxian felt that when he was with Luo Qingtong, he would never be able to figure out how many surprises she could bring to him. Just as Yi Qianxian's lips curled up, the door of the secret chamber suddenly opened. Luo Qingtong appeared in front of everyone, her face covered in sweat. Qingtong. The Grand Supreme Dean rushed over almost immediately. However, there was another figure who was faster than him and arrived in front of Luo Qingtong. He raised his hand and pulled her into his arms. "Why are you so tired?" Yi Qianxian furrowed his brows. He channeled a trace of his energy into Luo Qingtong's body and carefully checked her body. He was relieved when he found that she was only a little exhausted and was fine. If Luo Qingtong hurt herself while treating Bai Suqing, he might not be able to hold back his anger. Yi Qianxian's eyes were filled with coldness and anger. However, he quickly withdrew his aura when he found that Luo Qingtong was fine. Luo Qingtong looked at him and was about to speak when Qingtong's voice was heard. "Humph! Men, arrest them." He raised his hand and pointed at Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian. He could not touch the Grand Supreme Dean for the time being, but it did not mean that he could not touch the two of them. Today, he would let Zhu Yi know what regret was. "How dare you act recklessly in our Sky Yuan sect? How dare you lie that you have a way to cure my junior sister when you know that you can't treat her? Throw them into the dungeon. Wait until we see how my junior sister is doing. If my junior sister is not doing well, both of you, just wait to pay with your lives." Qingtong's voice was cold. Luo Qingtong originally wanted to tell the Grand Supreme Dean that Bai Suqing was fine. She raised her brows when she heard that. Then, she thought of the energy fluctuation that erupted when Bai Suqing had just broken through. So, did they think that she had failed? While Luo Qingtong was thinking, the Grand Supreme Dean, who was about to rush into the secret chamber, turned back immediately when he heard Qingtong's voice. "Qingtong, what are you doing? The matter is not clear yet. What right do you have to attack them? Moreover, if you have a problem, come at me. I asked them to treat her. It has nothing to do with the two of them. Do whatever you want to kill them," he said angrily. Qingtong was waiting for him to come at him. Otherwise, it would not be good for him to attack the Grand Supreme Dean by himself. But if the other party asked for it, then there would be no problem, right? After all, his junior Qianxian was courting death himself. Thought Luo Qingtong's thinking about it. Just as he was about to speak, Luo Qingtong's voice sounded first. "Wait." Luo Qingtong raised her hand to stop the Grand Supreme Dean. She raised her brows and looked at Qingtong. "Elder Chen, you can't wait to punish us. What will you say if I treat her injuries?" "Humph. If you can treat my junior sister's injuries, I'll immediately kneel on the ground and crawl around the Sky Yuan sect 3 times. Qingtong sneered. At this time, they still dared to act stubbornly and play the game of diversion. However, it was useless. Qingtong sneered as he said those words. However, as soon as he said those words, an extremely cold voice was heard from the secret chamber. Chapter 1968. Men, serve Elder Chen well. As she said that, Bai Suqing walked out of the secret chamber. Hiss. When they saw Bai Suqing, almost all the elders of the Sky Yuan sect gasped in disbelief. They looked at Bai Suqing, who had walked out of the secret chamber, in shock. The waves of aura rippling out from the latter's body shook their hearts. Saint Emperor Realm? One of the elders of the Sky Yuan sect shouted in disbelief. The others also had looks of disbelief on their faces. The strength of a Saint Emperor Realm was not a particularly powerful cultivation for the elders of the Sky Yuan sect. As a first-class sect, most of the elders of the Sky Yuan sect were at the Holy Spirit Realm or even close to the Holy Venerate Realm. There were even a few elders of the main peak who were at the holy venerate realm like the sect leader of the Sky Yuan sect. It was just that they were not as powerful as Bai Suqing. However, at that moment, the person standing in front of them was Bai Suqing, who was supposed to be a cripple. It was impossible that the elders of the Sky Yuan sect did not know what kind of injuries she had suffered. He even knew that for the sake of the Grand Principal, she had given the last bit of her strength to him. Under such circumstances, it was almost certain that she would become a cripple. Otherwise, the elders of the Sky Yuan sect would not have sighed for the Grand Supreme Dean when they heard that he and Chen Tong had used this as a wager. This was because they thought that the Grand Supreme Dean would definitely lose. However, when Bai Suqing stepped out of the secret chamber, not only was the violent energy in her body healed, but her aura and strength had also increased. How? How is this possible? Among them, Chen Tong was the most shocked. He still had a smug and cold smile on his face. He was about to instruct the people around him to capture Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian and imprison the Grand Supreme Dean. He was going to show the Grand Supreme Dean what it meant to be too late for regrets. However, Bai Suqing's appearance had shattered all of his hopes. He looked in disbelief at Bai Suqing who had appeared in front of him. He took a step forward and wanted to test the strength of the other party. This is impossible. Your strength must be fake. His face was flushed red. He raised his hand to grab Bai Suqing's hand, but the latter suddenly waved her hand away. Bang! A mighty and powerful aura burst out from Bai Suqing's hand and blasted toward Chen Tong. The latter hurriedly raised his hand to block the attack, but his body was blasted back by the attack and staggered back a few steps. At this moment, no one doubted that Bai Suqing's aura fluctuation was fake. She raised her hand and blasted out a powerful aura that was so condensed that it directly blasted the unprepared Chen Tong back. She couldn't possibly say that Chen Tong and the two of them colluded together, right? Moreover, with the strength of the Heavenly Yuan sect's elders present, how could they not be able to tell whether Bai Suqing had used her own power or a disguised external power in her attack? Su Qing, your strength has actually recovered. And it's still improving? The elders of the Sky Yuan sect who had come to witness the bet were pleasantly surprised. Chapter 1969. Bai Suqing's injuries had been healed and her strength had increased tremendously. No one knew better than them what this meant. All of this was simply too good to be true. As for the Grand Supreme Dean, his mouth was agape as he looked at Bai Suqing, who had stepped out of the secret chamber. His heart was filled with indescribable surprise and shock. You, junior sister, your injuries have been healed and your strength has been restored? She had even leveled up by 1 level. Oh my God! The Grand Supreme Dean was shocked. Previously, he had looked for Luo Qingtong with a glimmer of hope that Luo Qingtong would be able to prevent Bai Suqing's body from deteriorating and get rid of the energy that was entrenched in her body. As for her strength, the Grand Supreme Dean had never thought of asking Luo Qingtong to help her recover. After all, it would be too much to ask of her. He should be extremely grateful that Luo Qingtong was able to protect Bai Suqing's body under such circumstances. How would he dare to think of anything else? However, Luo Qingtong had done something that he did not even dare to think of. The Grand Supreme Dean rushed over and came to Bai Suqing's side. He took her pulse. Bai Suqing did not stop him but only looked at him angrily. Then, she followed him to check the condition of her body. She knew that the Grand Supreme Dean had been worried about her for a long time. Although he had been avoiding her for so many years and she was still angry with him, she would not let him worry too much about such a serious matter. Really? Little junior sister, you've really recovered all your strength. The berserk energy is also gone. The Grand Supreme Dean was so happy that he danced with joy. Bai Suqing was instantly annoyed when she saw him behaving like this. This person had been frivolous since he was young. At this moment, he was still frivolous. That's right. My strength has been fully restored and it has leveled up by 1 level. Moreover, she looked around at the people around her. Seeing their expectant gazes, she nodded and said, "There's not a trace of that violent energy left in my body. In the future, it will not cause any harm to my strength and body." Naturally, it would not cause any harm. After all, those powers had all become her own. Wasn't that the case? However, Bai Suqing didn't say it out loud. She could feel that Luo Qingtong was extraordinary for her to be able to do this. Once it was revealed, it would definitely cause a huge uproar. The other party was Zhu Yi's student. Since she was trying her best to save her, she naturally had to keep her secret. Moreover, she really didn't know how he did it. In that case, he would just pretend that he didn't know anything. Bai Suqing concealed this matter, which made Luo Qingtong somewhat surprised. She originally thought that Bai Suqing would reveal this matter, so she had already prepared a way to deal with it so that no one would suspect her pupil technique. Unexpectedly, Bai Suqing did not mention anything about it. Luo Qingtong could naturally see that she was covering up for herself. When Bai Suqing's voice was heard, the elders of the Sky Yuan sect also received the answer that they had expected. Immediately, they were elated. I didn't expect this young lady to be able to heal Bai Suqing's injuries. Chapter 1970. You should know that this injury is something that no one in the hidden world can heal. Every time we go to the land of the fallen immortals, there will be some disciples who will be harmed if we want to explore that place. Now that we have this little girl's treatment method, we don't have to worry so much. That's right. The elders of the Sky Yuan sect discussed animatedly as they looked at Luo Qingtong with love and admiration. As for Chen Tong, he was completely dumbfounded. Bai Suqing's words were the final fatal blow to him. Since she said that, it proved that she was not afraid of any investigation. Not all of the elders on the ground were from the sect master's side. So, what she said was true. Her injuries had actually been healed. Not only that, but her strength had also been restored and improved. This. Chen Tong looked in the direction of Luo Qingtong in amazement. He did not expect this little girl, who looked to be only 15 or 16 years old, to be able to heal the injury that many alchemists in the hidden world could not do anything about. If she could heal this injury, it meant that the people from the various sects could explore that place in the future. The forbidden area in the land of the fallen immortals. It was impossible for Chen Tong to not know what this represented. At this moment, Bai Suqing shifted her gaze to him. Chen Tong, didn't you say that you want to kneel and crawl around the Sky Yuan sect 3 times? She sneered and looked at Chen Tong. You can start now. Or do you need me to ask someone to invite you over? Bai Suqing's face was cold. Chen Tong had been targeting the Grand Supreme Dean and Luo Qingtong since the beginning. He had invited so many elders of the Sky Yuan sect to be witnesses. He probably did not expect this to happen, right? Since he had given her a handle, if she did not make use of it, wouldn't she be letting down his good intentions? Bai Suqing sneered and glanced at the elders of the Sky Yuan sect who were invited by Chen Tong. Elders, you've all heard what Chen Tong said just now. We didn't force him to say that. He said it himself. If that's the case, you have to admit defeat. Bai Suqing used the words that Chen Tong said to the Grand Supreme Dean to stop him. She said coldly, Elder Chen, please go ahead. Bai Suqing did not even want to call him senior brother. She was afraid of dirtying her mouth. Chen Tong's actions were seriously too disgusting. You. Chen Tong's face was ghastly pale. He did not expect things would turn out this way. What he said earlier was just a casual taunt. Who would have thought that Luo Qingtong would really cure Bai Suqing? Not only that, but it also helped her recover her cultivation, raising her strength to a whole new level. Now, he have no way to back down. Chen Tong's to Chen Tong said Luo Qingtong's Chen, said Luo's. She quietly pulled Bai Suqing's sleeve. Say she's to Lin immortal said Luo said no. Said Luto Luo Lin said Lin. Bai Suqing frowned slightly. The Grand Supreme Dean, who was beside her, also looked at Luo Qingtong in surprise. He did not know what Lin was up to. Would she really not pursue Chen Tong's matter? That bastard wanted to catch them just now. Chapter 1971. Moreover, this girl's character had never been so forgiving and repaying evil with good. Had her character changed? The Grand Supreme Dean and Bai Suqing looked surprised. Yi Qianxian, who was beside Luo Qingtong, looked calm. Based on his understanding of Luo Qingtong, she definitely had more to say. Chen Tong would not be able to refute and could only do as she said. Let him go? No way. Sure enough, after Luo Qingtong spoke, she said timidly, Mistress, forget it. Your Tianyuan sect is a first-class faction. Elder Chen Tong said that this is not a place where we can act wildly. It's not appropriate for us to continue like this. Aren't we just being wronged and almost arrested? It's okay. If we continue like this, what if the Grand Supreme Dean is driven out of the Tianyuan sect? This will harm you and the Grand Supreme Dean. We'd better not talk too much here. Otherwise, I'm afraid we won't be able to walk out of here. After all, this is a first-class faction. Luo Qingtong's words hit the nail on the head. She kept saying that they were a first-class faction. She even said that they did not dare to speak too much. If the people of the Tianyuan sect thought that they were causing trouble, they would not be able to walk out of here. These words made the elders of the Tianyuan sect feel indescribably awkward. Luo Qingtong's words sounded so compromising. However, in fact, she did not do anything wrong. On the contrary, Chen Tong deliberately targeted them and even arrested them in order to deal with the Grand Supreme Dean. Luo Qingtong had cured Bai Suqing. If such a person had to suffer such treatment in the Sky Yuan sect, and they dared not speak out despite their anger, how bad would the reputation of the Sky Yuan sect be when it got out? Moreover, Bai Suqing's injury that Luo Qingtong cured was not ordinary. Luo Qingtong could cure this injury and restore the other party's cultivation. This meant that the people of the Tianyuan sect could enter the land of the deceased immortals and explore that place without having to worry about the inexplicable power there. The elders of the Tianyuan sect naturally could not allow such a person to be prejudiced against the Tianyuan sect. Thinking about this, one of the elders of the Tianyuan sect suddenly said, Chen Tong, this is all because of you. Since you've said that, then just do as you've said. This is to prevent others from saying that the people of the Tianyuan sect go back on their words. That's right. Another elder of the Tianyuan sect also said. The Tianyuan sect's Chen Tong was the Tianyuan sect. Since that was the case, he had to bear the consequences of what he said. They couldn't possibly cover up for him in front of Bai Suqing and the others, right? The Tianyuan of 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 course. He was still thinking of how to get out of this and had already thought of a way. He was prepared to let the elders, who were here as witnesses, exonerate him. After all, as the chief disciple of the Tianyuan sect, it would be very embarrassing if he really knelt and crawled around the Tianyuan sect 3 times. He thought that the elders of the Tianyuan sect would let Bai Suqing and the rest settle the matter peacefully in order to avoid such a thing. At that time, he would just apologize. However, he did not expect Luo Qingtong to be so treacherous. By retreating in order to advance, she had blocked all his leeway. Chapter 1972. The group of elders opened their mouths to demand that he fulfill his promise. Chen Tong was truly angered until he almost spat out a mouthful of old blood. However, this was not enough. When Luo Qingtong saw him glaring at her, she immediately took 2 steps back and hugged Yi Qianxian's arm. She said in shock, no need. We don't dare to ask Elder Chentong to fulfill his promise. He said that in the absence of the sect leader, he is the most powerful person in the Tian Yuan sect. And the sect leader will die sooner or later. The entire Tian Yuan sect will be under his control in the future. All the elders have to listen to him. Otherwise, when he becomes the sect leader, he will kill whoever he dislikes. No one will stand up for us. Even if there is, they will die miserably in the future. We and the Grand Supreme Dean have no intention of going against him. The Grand Supreme Dean also doesn't want to return to the position of the first disciple. Elders, please don't punish him. Otherwise, it will not be good for you and us in the future. The moment Luo Qingtong said this, Chentong could no longer hold back the mouthful of blood in his throat and spat it out. Nonsense. Bastard. What nonsense are you spouting? Chentong was about to die from anger. He looked at the unfriendly gazes of the elders around him and was instantly flustered and exasperated. I didn't say those words at all. Yes. Luo Qingtong quickly said, Elder Chentong didn't say those words. I'm sorry, elders. I was confused and said the wrong thing. Luo Qingtong looked very nervous. She said, Elders, please don't take my words to heart. Also, can we forget about punishing Elder Chentong? The Grand Supreme Dean and I will leave this place immediately. Please don't pursue this matter. The more Luo Qingtong spoke, the thicker the taste of blood in Chentong's throat became. Luo Qingtong was not clarifying things for him. It clearly confirmed what she had said. Sure enough, there were still some elders who looked doubtful and didn't believe what Luo Qingtong said before, but at this meeting, they also showed an angry look. There was no other reason. Chentong was very likely to say these words in front of Luo Qingtong and the others. After all, in his eyes, Luo Qingtong and the others were not even worth mentioning. And the reason why Luo Qingtong was so scared that she didn't even dare to pursue the matter was because she was afraid that he would take revenge after he took over the Sky Yuan sect. That was why he told Bai Suqing not to pursue the matter when he was in the right. Otherwise, based on what Chentong had said earlier, and the fact that they had asked the other party to fulfill his promise, no matter what, she had to vent her anger first. The group of Heavenly Yuan sect elders looked at Chentong with an unfriendly expression. I didn't expect Chentong to have such thoughts. That's right. To think that he still remembers what happened to us. He's preparing to take revenge after he takes over. The elders of the Heavenly Yuan sect were furious. It wasn't as if they had never had any disagreements with Chentong before. More or less, they had some conflicts and differences of opinion with him. But they didn't expect Chentong to remember all of it and was preparing to take revenge after he took over. How could this be? In particular, when they thought about how they had just asked him to fulfill his promise, did he remember what they had said and was preparing to make them die miserably in the future? Chapter 1973. If Chentong took revenge on them after becoming the sect leader of the Sky Yuan sect, it would be impossible for them to guard against him. No, they had to stop this. The elders of the Sky Yuan sect felt a sense of crisis. They instantly turned their attention to the Grand Supreme Dean. Zhu Yi was the former chief disciple of the Sky Yuan sect. If he had not been injured in the land of the fallen immortals and lost his strength, Chentong would not have been promoted. Since Chentong already held a grudge against them, what was wrong with changing the chief disciple? In terms of strength and experience, Zhu Yi was not inferior to Chentong. Moreover, he was more suitable than Chentong to become the chief disciple of the Sky Yuan sect and take charge of the Sky Yuan sect. After all, he was the person Bai Suqing liked. As the elders of the Sky Yuan sect thought of this, they immediately reached a consensus. They looked at each other. Then, an elder of the Sky Yuan sect said coldly, "Humph, the Sky Yuan sect is not a place where anyone can do whatever they want." They glanced coldly at Chentong, who felt a chill in his heart. Then, they looked at Luo Qingtong and the others and said, "As for the promise you made, he naturally has to fulfill it. Moreover, he is not the only one who can be the chief disciple of the Sky Yuan sect. It's too early to talk about inheriting the Sky Yuan sect." "That's right." Another elder of the Sky Yuan sect also said coldly, "Zhu Yi used to be the chief disciple of the Sky Yuan sect. His actions have always been in line with our wishes. He just had to leave the sect because of some accidents. Now that he has returned and cleared up the misunderstanding with Bai Suqing, he should return to the position of the chief disciple. As for Qintong's temporary position, we will jointly request the sect leader to remove it in a few days. In the future, Zhu Yi will be the new chief disciple of the Sky Yuan sect and the person who will inherit the Sky Yuan sect." "That's right." The elders of the Sky Yuan sect echoed in unison. Hearing their voices, Qintong couldn't suppress the sweet taste in his throat no matter how hard he tried. He trembled as he looked at the elders who were speaking in unison. Seeing them say that his years as the chief disciple were all temporary, he could not breathe for a long time. "You." He raised his hand and pointed at the elders of the Sky Yuan sect, but he could not utter a single harsh word. It wasn't that he couldn't say it, but that he couldn't. He couldn't say it either. If he said something harsh, wouldn't that prove what Luo Qingtong said before? He had a grudge against the elders, so he was going to settle it after he took control of the Heaven Yuan sect. Luo Qingtong's words were not completely wrong. Qintong did have such a thought in his mind. But even if he did, he couldn't expose it in front of others. However, because of his arrogance and willfulness towards Luo Qingtong and the others, no one would listen to him even if he told the truth. Qintong coughed up blood. And Luo Qingtong's next words made his eyes go black, and he almost fell to the ground. The young girl was overjoyed. "Really? The Grand Principal would be the first disciple in the future? Can I still ask him to keep his promise?" She pointed at Qintong. "Of course." The elders of the Sky Yuan sect answered very straightforwardly. Chapter 1974. In the end, Qintong was carried away. He had set up this trap so that he could chase the Grand Supreme Dean out of the Sky Yuan sect in an open and above-board manner. He wanted to eliminate all future troubles. However, no one had expected that he would be the unlucky one in the end. He had made such a big fuss and invited all the elders of the Sky Yuan sect. In the end, he was the one who ended up in a sorry state. Not only that, he had even lost his position as the chief disciple. If he had known this would happen, he would never have made such a bet with Luo Qingtong and the rest. Originally, the Grand Supreme Dean did not have the chance to return to the Sky Yuan sect and become the chief disciple. It was he who had given her the chance. In the end, Luo Qingtong had turned the tables on him. At this point, how could Qintong hold himself back? He was so angry that he fainted on the spot. As for the Grand Supreme Dean, he had been staring at Luo Qingtong with his mouth wide open ever since she opened her mouth. Oh my God, this evil doctor child. Previously, he had thought that Luo Qingtong felt that this was the Sky Yuan sect and it would not be easy to deal with Qintong. Therefore, she was prepared to let Qintong off peacefully. At that time, he was prepared to tell Luo Qingtong not to be afraid and to argue as they were in the right. However, who would have thought that Luo Qingtong was not going to let Qintong off? She was clearly going to kill Qintong. This move of retreating in order to advance was really amazing. The Grand Supreme Dean had already seen that when Bai Suqing opened her mouth, a few elders had already frowned. They probably felt that if Qintong were to be punished according to what they had said, it would damage the image of the Sky Yuan sect. At that time, those elders had already been prepared to speak. However, when Luo Qingtong spoke, those elders suddenly stopped talking. This little child of the evil doctor was simply amazing. If they were aggressive and insisted that Chen Tong fulfill his promise, their image in front of the elders of the Sky Yuan sect would definitely not be good. Especially since he had not been in the Heavenly Yuan sect all these years, Chen Tong's position here was much more stable than his. At that time, if the elders of the Heavenly Yuan sect stood up for Chen Tong for the sake of the Heavenly Yuan sect's image, even if they insisted that Chen Tong fulfill his promise, Chen Tong might not agree. Moreover, he could easily shirk this debt. But Luo Qingtong's move was different. Immediately, Chen Tong stood against the group of Sky Yuan sect elders. He did not even have the chance to refute before he was convicted of a crime. Who asked him to be so arrogant before? Are you all right now? You've dug a hole for yourself. The Grand Supreme Dean chuckled. He didn't expect Luo Qingtong to have such a trick up her sleeve. Not only did he cause Chen Tong's death, he also allowed Chen Tong to regain his position as the chief disciple. Oh my God! This little child of the evil doctor was really something. The Grand Supreme Dean felt that he had made the right decision in inviting Luo Qingtong to the Sky Yuan sect. Otherwise, he did not know how long he would have to struggle with Chen Tong. Chen Tong's position and identity in the Sky Yuan sect were deeply rooted. Even if the Grand Supreme Dean had the support of Bai Suqing and the Sky Yuan sect leader, he might not be able to regain his position as the chief disciple. He might even be hindered secretly by Chen Tong and be unable to smoothly return to the Sky Yuan sect and be together with Bai Suqing. Now, everything had been resolved. Aya, little child of the evil doctor, you're really my lucky star. Chapter 1975. It was as if a dozen buckets of ice water had been poured over him on a hot summer day. He was so happy that he almost lost his sense of direction. If Yi Qianxian had not been standing beside Luo Qingtong, he might have run over and hugged Luo Qingtong. Of course, the result would have been very tragic. Because Bai Suqing was beside him. Bai Suqing looked at Luo Qingtong in surprise. She had the same thought as the Grand Supreme Dean. She thought that Luo Qingtong was in the Sky Yuan sect, so she wanted to keep the peace and did not want to be calculative with Chen Tong. She did not expect that behind her, there were so many traps waiting for Chen Tong. When Bai Suqing recalled the scene where Chen Tong was so angry that he vomited blood and fainted, she pursed her lips into a smile. Her beautiful face did not lose its heroic spirit and sharpness. Zhu Yi's student was really interesting. Her way of doing things was very impressive. Moreover, she had her own way of doing things. Not only did she not use any of their strength to teach Chen Tong a lesson, but she also helped them a lot. This favor was not something that could be repaid by Zhu Yi, who had helped her a few times before. Thinking of this, Bai Suqing suddenly said to the elders, "Elders, you have seen clearly what happened today." Chen Tong doubted Qingtong's medical skills for no reason. In order to save me, she spent a lot of energy and effort. If she was not Zhu Yi's student, she would not have worked so hard. Now, she is being slandered in our sect. It is really disappointing. Elders, don't you think that we should compensate her well? Otherwise, who would dare to take action when invited by the Sky Yuan sect in the future? After all, she did not receive any reward, but was still slandered and was almost arrested and thrown into the dungeon. Bai Suqing's face was full of sarcasm. When the elders of the Sky Yuan sect heard this, they were speechless. This was indeed the case. Luo Qingtong was invited to treat Bai Suqing's injuries. Not only did the people of the Sky Yuan sect not treat her with courtesy, but they also almost arrested her and threw her into the dungeon. This was something that Chen Tong had clearly said earlier. They couldn't possibly pretend that it didn't happen. Hearing this, the group of Sky Yuan sect elders immediately looked at Bai Suqing and said, "Suqing, how do you think we should compensate for this?" The elders knew that Bai Suqing wanted to stand up for Luo Qingtong and the others to get some benefits. However, it was true that Chen Tong was in the wrong. The Heavenly Yuan sect was in the wrong. Secondly, Luo Qingtong could cure Bai Suqing's injury. For them, it was worth winning over. If possible, they naturally didn't want her to complain to them. As for Luo Qingtong, she raised her eyebrows and looked at Bai Suqing when she spoke. The latter winked at her, indicating for her not to speak. He then turned to the elders of the Heavenly Yuan sect and said, I think we should give this girl the title of honorary guest elder. Otherwise, I'm afraid that some shameless people will harm her. Of course, if you can solve this problem for her, then pretend that I didn't say anything. The problem that Bai Suqing was talking about was naturally Chen Tong. All the elders were well aware of the situation. However, it was impossible to solve Chen Tong's problem. Chen Tong did not do anything to harm the Sky Yuan sect. Moreover, he was an elder of the Sky Yuan sect. Chapter 1976. How could the elders of Sky Yuan sect lay a hand on her? Moreover, there was no crime. As the elders of Sky Yuan sect thought of this, they could only agree to Bai Suqing's request. Alright, from today onwards, Luo Qingtong. At this moment, Bai Suqing continued. Luo Qingtong is the honorary guest elder of Sky Yuan sect. In a few days, we will report this matter to the sect leader and send the token of the honorary guest elder over. One of the elders of Sky Yuan sect's main peak said. Basically, with the approval and agreement of the elders of the various peaks, and if the sect master did not have any objections, then Luo Qingtong's honorary guest elder position would be secured. The sect leader of Sky Yuan sect had always regarded the Grand Supreme Dean as his son and Bai Suqing was his daughter. How could he object to this matter? Since the elder of Sky Yuan sect had spoken and the other elders had no objections, this matter was considered a success. When Luo Qingtong saw this scene, she raised her eyebrows. Honorary guest elder? When Luo Qingtong came to the hidden world previously, she had heard of this title. It was said that this was a very precious and rare title among the sects in the hidden world. Generally, only those who had made great contributions to the sects would be able to enjoy this title. With this title, it was equivalent to having the identity and authority of an elder with real power in the sects. However, one did not need to do anything for the sects and did not need to listen to the sects' orders. In other words, one only needed to enjoy the rites and did not need to perform any duties. Luo Qingtong did not expect Bai Suqing to get such a title for her. After Bai Suqing sent off the elders of Sky Yuan sect, she turned around and saw the expression on Bai Suqing's face. She smiled and said, "This is what you deserve." If it were someone else, even if I made such a request, they would not agree to it. How could the title of honorary guest elder of a first-class sect be so easy to obtain? Bai Suqing naturally knew that rather than saying that she had gotten this title for Luo Qingtong, it was better to say that the elders had taken a liking to the fact that Luo Qingtong could treat her injuries and deliberately pushed the boat along with the current. It was the same before. The reason why those elders immediately stood against Chen Tong was because of the fact that Luo Qingtong had healed her injuries. The weight of it was enough. Otherwise, even if they believed what Luo Qingtong said about Chen Tong, they wouldn't support them so easily. Bai Suqing was very clear about this. That was why she suggested to them that she wanted to give Luo Qingtong the title of honorary guest elder. She was sure that they would agree. Unless they could think of a better way to compensate Luo Qingtong. Little girl, you probably don't know what it means for you to be able to heal my injuries, restore my strength, and advance to the next level. Bai Suqing asked Luo Qingtong and the others to follow her back to her room. Then, she said to Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian. Mistress, you must have gotten this injury in the land of the fallen immortals, right? Luo Qingtong looked at Bai Suqing and raised her eyebrows slightly. Chapter 1977. You guessed it? Bai Suqing looked at Luo Qingtong in surprise, then said, My injuries, including your Grand Supreme Dean's, were all from that place in the land of the deceased immortals. She thought that Yi Qianxian was also one of the Grand Supreme Dean's students. Yi Qianxian did not refute this. What others thought had nothing to do with him. He came to the Tianyuan sect this time only to prevent Luo Qingtong from being bullied. In fact, if the elders of the Tianyuan sect had not sided with Chen Tong, perhaps Yi Qianxian would have already taken action. At this moment, he held Luo Qingtong with one hand and did not make a sound. Luo Qingtong asked, "That place? Mistress, is the place you mentioned very different from the others in the land of the deceased immortals?" Luo Qingtong came to the Tianyuan sect this time to obtain more first-hand information about the land of the deceased immortals. This way, she would be more confident when she entered it. Prepare before the rain. When the army was about to march, the provisions would arrive first. Luo Qingtong would never regret her lack of preparation when things were about to happen. If that was the case, she would have died countless times in her previous life. No one was born to be calculative. All of Luo Qingtong's meticulous plans were built on the various lessons she had experienced in her previous life. She had grown up after escaping from death countless times, so she rarely made mistakes now. Because in her previous life, the price of making a mistake was likely to be her death. She was arrogant, proud, and unscrupulous. That was because she was careful and confident enough. She was not arrogant and conceited. Bai Suqing nodded. That place is a forbidden area in the land of the deceased immortals. I think you must have heard about the land of the deceased immortals. Bai Suqing looked at Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian and said. She couldn't see through Yi Qianren's strength, but she knew Luo Qingtong's strength because the latter didn't deliberately hide it and revealed it in front of her. As a Saint King, Luo Qingtong was fully qualified to enter the land of the fallen immortals. As for Yi Qianxian, she probably couldn't sense it because he was too weak. Bai Suqing thought. Yes. I know a little. Luo Qingtong nodded. It said that the land of the fallen immortals was created because the experts from outside the realm were fighting for something. That's right. Bai Suqing looked at her and nodded. Since you know all this, I'm sure you want to go in and check it out, right? The weakening of the aura of the land of the fallen immortals is coming. At that time, all the sects in the hidden world will go in and try their luck. You should come with us. With me and Zhu Yi here, you should be fine. As for the land of the fallen immortals, it was indeed formed because of this reason. And it said that the thing that the experts from outside the realm were fighting for was related to the divine beasts. Divine beasts? Luo Qingtong looked at Bai Suqing in surprise. Bai Suqing nodded. We don't know the details, but we can be sure that it is related to the divine beasts. Someone saw the shadow of the divine beasts in the forbidden area where your Grand Supreme Dean and I were injured. And the forbidden area we entered was indeed shrouded in an inexplicable pressure. The power there is stronger than anywhere else in the land of the fallen immortals. Chapter 1978. The aura left in our bodies was very violent. There were also terrifying claw marks on the ground. We weren't directly hit at that time. We were only swept by the claw wind. Otherwise, we might not have been able to return. And the most surprising thing is that the pressure and power there will change according to the strength of the person who enters. In other words, even if a person with the strength of a Saint Venerable goes in, if they aren't careful enough, they might be killed by the claw marks. Because that place is too terrifying. That's why we call that place a forbidden area. But if our guess is right, that place should be the core of the land of the fallen immortals. It's also the reason why the land of the fallen immortals was formed. The thing that many powerhouses from outside the domain are fighting for should be inside there. As Bai Suqing was speaking, Yi Qianxian's voice suddenly sounded. Since such a place exists, why didn't the people from the Star Alliance Hall go to take it? Bai Suqing looked at him in surprise when she heard his voice. You know about the Star Alliance Hall? Most people didn't know about the existence of the Star Alliance Hall. However, she didn't think too much about it. She just assumed that the Supreme Dean had accidentally leaked it before. The people from the Star Alliance Hall certainly wanted to take it, but the aura and the land of the fallen immortals repelled people from outside the domain. And even powerhouses from the true Spill continent, those above the Saint Venerable realm, couldn't enter. Otherwise, they would die inexplicably. Bai Suqing said, the people from the Star Alliance Hall sent a lot of powerhouses in from the beginning. But without exception, none of them came out. Finally, a sub-hall master went in and didn't come out again. So, they didn't send anyone else in. Hearing this, Yi Qianxian suddenly frowned. People from outside the domain couldn't go in? Then, only Luo Qingtong and Suyu could enter the land of the fallen immortals? All they could do was wait outside? Thinking of this, Yi Qianxian's expression suddenly became serious. He asked Bai Suqing, has the Star Alliance tried it? When Bai Suqing heard this, she looked at him with even more astonishment. Zhu Yi even told you this? She looked at Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian and said, the Star Alliance has also sent experts here, but the aura contained in the land of the deceased immortals is in danger of collapsing and vanishing if it comes into contact with too much power. Therefore, that Star Alliance expert didn't force his way in. After that, no one from the Hall of Star Alliance entered. Yi Qianxian's frown deepened when he heard Bai Suqing's words. Luo Qingtong felt very strange. According to the conversation between Bai Suqing and Yi Qianxian, the Star Alliance Hall didn't seem to be a sect in the hidden world. Instead, it was a sub-hall built by a foreign organization called the Star Alliance. While she was guessing, Bai Suqing's voice sounded. But now, the people from the Star Alliance Hall have rekindled their hope in the land of the deceased immortals. Because the people from the beast-taming King's Valley obtained a treasure map. It said that it can lead to the center of the forbidden area. Hearing this, Luo Qingtong's expression suddenly became strange. The treasure map obtained by the people from the beast-taming King's Valley? It can't be what I think it is, right? Chapter 1979. It is said that the map was originally obtained by the people of Celestial Palace, but it was snatched away by the people of beast-taming King's Valley. Luo Qingtong almost choked on her own saliva when she heard Bai Suqing's words. It was actually true. She didn't expect that framing the murder of the people of Celestial Palace to the people of beast-taming King's Valley would bring about such benefits. Luo Qingtong also didn't expect that the treasure map was actually related to the forbidden area in the land of the deceased immortals. Fortunately, she framed the people of beast-taming King's Valley. Otherwise, if those from Extreme Sky Palace were to track down the true Spill continent, then even if Yi Qianren were to destroy them, it would still attract the attention of all the sects in the hidden worlds. At that time, it would really be a disaster for the secular world of the true Spill continent. Not to mention the existence of her enemy, beast-taming King's Valley. The consequences would be even more unimaginable. As Luo Qingtong thought about it, she felt very fortunate. She looked at Bai Suqing and asked, did the people of beast-taming King's Valley give the treasure map to the people of Star Alliance? Speaking of this, Luo Qingtong was really curious. Others might not know, but she was very clear about it. The people of beast-taming King's Valley didn't have this map. That map was in her hands. Of course not. Bai Suqing looked at her and shook her head. The people of beast-taming King's Valley refused to take out the map. Even when we, the first-class sects, sought cooperation with them, they refused. Because of this, they offended a large number of people of the hidden world. Because my father was in seclusion to break through, our Sky Yuan sect didn't go to beast-taming King's Valley. But I heard that the other first-class sect sovereigns went. The people of Star Alliance also went in person to mediate between beast-taming King's Valley and Celestial Palace. But the people of beast-taming King's Valley didn't give face. It is said that when the people of Star Alliance left, their expressions were very bad. They had already publicly supported the people of Celestial Palace. When Luo Qingtong heard this, she suddenly burst out laughing. She couldn't hold it in any longer. It wasn't that the beast-taming King's Valley didn't want to give him face, but they didn't even have the map in their hands. Bai Suqing did not know about this. I don't know why the beast-taming King's Valley would make such a decision. She paused for a moment before continuing with a confused expression. Now that everyone knows that the map is in their hands, they won't share it. As long as they're willing to bring everyone into the Forbidden Zone, it'll be up to their own abilities to decide who gets what. They rejected the people from the first-class sects and even offended the people from the Star Alliance. When the land of the deceased immortals opens, won't we still be able to follow them to their destination? Unless they don't want that treasure. Otherwise, wouldn't the result be the same? At most, the losses of the other sects would be slightly greater. Bai Suqing couldn't understand why the beast-taming King's Valley would make such a decision. He offended a bunch of people from the hidden world for no reason and even offended the people from the Star Alliance Hall. How would they benefit in the future? When Luo Qingtong heard this, she immediately held back her laughter and coughed lightly. Cough, maybe, there's a hole in his head. When she said this, she suddenly couldn't hold it in anymore and laughed until she collapsed in Yi Qianqian's arms. Oh my God! Chapter 1980. Yi Qianqian looked at the woman who fell into his arms with a smile and felt extremely helpless. This woman is really infected by Luo Qingtong's smile. His cold face hidden behind the dark golden mask also revealed a faint smile. Even the depression he felt when he heard that they couldn't enter the land of the deceased immortals dissipated a lot. It would be best if this woman could continue to be so carefree and happy. As for the land of the deceased immortals, Yi Qianqian narrowed his eyes slightly. If Luo Qingtong was really in danger, so what if he destroyed that place? Just because the Star Alliance didn't do it, it didn't mean that he wouldn't do it. Girl, your smile is so. The Grand Dean looked at Luo Qingtong's smile and his lips twitched. He thought for a long time before he found a word to describe Luo Qingtong's smile. Treacherous. What are you thinking about? The Grand Dean would never have thought that the predicament the people of beast-taming King Valley were facing at this moment was completely because of Luo Qingtong. Luo Qingtong naturally wouldn't say it out loud. Firstly, the treasure map was very important. Although she trusted the Grand Dean and the others, it was better if fewer people knew about it. Secondly, the matter of tricking beast-taming King Valley was too complicated. It was a long story and she was too lazy to explain. She smiled and waved her hand. After a long while, he finally stopped smiling. He looked at the Grand Dean and Bai Suqing and said, "In that case, everyone wants to go to the forbidden area to obtain the treasures?" "Yes." Bai Suqing nodded. "So you know? Why did all the elders side with you just now?" "It's because you can remove the inexplicable power that blasted into our bodies in the forbidden area. The disciples who entered the forbidden area were lucky enough to come out of that violent power. Those who weren't lucky, like us, were either half-crippled or completely crippled. Basically, they can't use their full strength in this lifetime. Under normal circumstances, people like us who were injured by that power would either leave the sect and live the rest of their lives alone." As she spoke, she glanced at the Grand Supreme Dean. Then, she continued, "Or you can be like me and pass on your strength to the younger generation and then commit suicide. There is no third path." However, that was in the past. Now that you have appeared, we have seen a third path. That means he's safe and sound, and can even recover and improve his strength. After hearing Bai Suqing's words, Luo Qingtong finally understood why her plan went so smoothly today. The elders of the Sky Yuan sect were too cooperative, leaving her with no way to deal with them. So, it's because he's interested in my ability to heal Bai Suqing and improve her strength? As Luo Qingtong thought about it, she smiled. That would be great news for her. If she could rely on this to enter the land of the deceased immortals with the people of the Sky Yuan sect, Suyu and the rest would be safe. As Luo Qingtong was thinking, she heard Bai Suqing say, "So, I want to ask, Qingtong, is it because you were lucky that you were able to turn that violent power into my strength, or is it because you can really do it, regardless of whether it's me or anyone else?" Bai Suqing called Luo Qingtong and the rest in to ask about this in private so that they would know. Chapter 1981. Luo Qingtong immediately understood the meaning behind Bai Suqing's words. She smiled and said, "Mistress, I know what you want to say." She said to Bai Suqing, "It's true that I can dissolve that violent power for anyone. But I wouldn't do it for others like you, mistress." The moment Luo Qingtong said that, Bai Suqing immediately sensed the meaning behind her words. She won't do it, not can't do it. In other words, Luo Qingtong could transform the force for others like she did, but she was unwilling to do it. Bai Suqing understood in her heart. "Okay, I'll help you smooth things over." Bai Suqing was surprised that Luo Qingtong had such a magical ability to transform the violent force into their own strength. But since Luo Qingtong was unwilling to expose it, Bai Suqing would not force her. She would not pry into her secret. This was one of the most basic principles of being a human. Moreover, Luo Qingtong had helped her. Moreover, she had helped the Grand Supreme Dean to recover his cultivation. Without her, she and Zhu Yi would not be able to continue their relationship. Bai Suqing naturally respected Luo Qingtong's decision. As for the faction, it was enough that Luo Qingtong could dissolve the violent force. In this way, they would have a guarantee when they walked in the forbidden area. As long as they could remove the force in time, it would not affect their cultivation at all. There was no need to transform the force into their own strength. In that case, wouldn't everyone fight to be the first to enter the forbidden area and hope that the force could invade their bodies? As Bai Suqing thought of this, she was shocked. She suddenly understood why Luo Qingtong said, "She won't do it." This ability was really too heaven-defying. If Luo Qingtong announced that she had such an ability to transform the violent force into a cultivator's strength. If that was the case, the sect would do everything in their power to keep her in the sect, so that she could become a strength converter for them. After all, as long as Luo Qingtong was there, she could convert the terrifying power into strength. Wouldn't that be faster than cultivating on his own? Luo Qingtong's ability was too heaven-defying. Bai Suqing didn't know how Luo Qingtong did it, but once this ability was exposed, it would inevitably cause an uproar. It could be said that the other party trusted her and the Grand Supreme Dean very much. Otherwise, he wouldn't have exposed such a big secret in order to save her. Wasn't she afraid that he would tell others about this? Bai Suqing's heart was moved. What she didn't know was that since Luo Qingtong dared to expose it, she wasn't afraid that she would tell others. Moreover, she believed in her own judgment. At the very least, she had misjudged him. Wasn't there still Yi Qianxian? The man said that Luo Qingtong didn't need to hide her ability when she was by his side. She could use it whenever she wanted. If the people of the Sky Yuan sect were really greedy like what Bai Suqing thought, they wouldn't even know how they died. Luo Qingtong could even mess with the people of the beast-taming King Valley and the Celestial Palace. Why would she be afraid of the Sky Yuan sect? If she was afraid, she wouldn't have accepted the Grand Supreme Dean's invitation. She would naturally return the favor that she owed. Chapter 1982. Luo Qingtong looked at Bai Suqing and smiled. "Thank you, mistress." Since Bai Suqing was so protective of her, she naturally wouldn't let her suffer. "I'm willing to help the Sky Yuan sect neutralize the strange power from the Forbidden Zone. Of course, this is all for the sake of mistress and the Grand Supreme Dean. Also." Luo Qingtong smiled and said, "I have another team." When we enter the land of the deceased immortals, I hope to be able to join the Sky Yuan Sect's team. The Sky Yuan Sect will provide the immortal jade bones that they will use to enter the land of the deceased immortals. In exchange, Luo Qingtong smiled at Bai Suqing and said, I will purify the power of the immortal jade bones for the Sky Yuan Sect's people. The immortal jade bones needed to enter the land of the deceased immortals. The stronger the cultivator was and the longer they stayed in the land of the deceased immortals, the better the quality and quantity of the immortal jade bones. This was the only way to perfectly resist the corrosive aura in the land of the deceased immortals. Luo Qingtong couldn't be with Su Yu and the others all the time. The Breeze Pavilion's resources were definitely not enough to support Su Yu and the others to stay in the land of the deceased immortals for too long. To put it bluntly, the immortal jade bones might not even be enough for Luo Qingtong alone. However, with the support of the Sky Yuan Sect, Luo Qingtong didn't have to worry so much. As for purifying the power of the immortal jade bones, this was a win-win situation for Luo Qingtong. There was nothing to hide. The more immortal jade bones the Sky Yuan Sect obtained, the more immortal jade bones she needed to purify, the more luxuriant the ancient heavenly spirit would grow. Luo Qingtong also realized that as the ancient heavenly spirit grew, the ancient heavenly spirit began to grow. After the 10th leaf grew, its growth slowed down. It had yet to grow an 11th leaf. Perhaps the death qi in the immortal jade bones was no longer enough to nourish it. Under such circumstances, Luo Qingtong naturally needed more immortal jade bones to purify it. And the Heavenly Yuan Sect was an excellent way to do so. The moment Luo Qingtong's words left her mouth, Bai Suqing and the Grand Supreme Dean gasped. Especially the Grand Supreme Dean. He finally understood why the people of the Breeze Pavilion had refused to let go of Luo Qingtong and the others. After that, the people of Celestial Palace could not help but show up. So it was because Luo Qingtong could purify the immortal jade bone? He had thought that they were here for the immortal jade bone in the space at the bottom of the cliff. Oh my God! How many more abilities does this evil Dr. Kid have? At this moment, Bai Suqing was glad that she was in her boudoir and had set up layers of barriers to ask Luo Qingtong. Are you sure you can purify the power of the immortal jade bone? She asked in disbelief. The impact of this matter on her was no less than when Luo Qingtong was able to dissolve and transform the power in her body for her. I'm sure. As Luo Qingtong spoke, she took out a piece of immortal jade bone that she had purified and showed it to Bai Suqing. Master's wife, look. Damn. No wonder that kid Ma Chenye's strength has soared recently, as if he was injected with chicken blood. Did you give these things to him as well? The Grand Supreme Dean stared at her. This evil Dr. Kid actually did not tell him about such good things. And Ma Chenye, that stinky kid, actually kept it from him all this time. Luo Qingtong smiled but did not say anything. She did not give it to the Grand Supreme Dean because she was wary of him. Chapter 1983. He was the Grand Dean of the Sacred Academy of the Empire of Qin. If she gave it to him, what would he do if the people of the Academy asked her for it? Luo Qingtong didn't have so much stock to give it to him. She could give it to Ma Chenye because he defended her without hesitation when Feng Wuan attacked the two dynasties. If the Empire of Qin hadn't diverted some of Great Yong's attention at that time. With all the armies pressing on the border, the people of Great Chu wouldn't have been able to hold on until she came back. Luo Qingtong had to return this favor. As for the others, she couldn't care so much. Luo Qingtong was very clear about the difference between her own people and others. Okay, I know. The Grand Dean was depressed. At this moment, he also understood why Luo Qingtong didn't give it to him. She was afraid that he would use it for personal gain. But it was very likely that he would do so at that time. After all, he had deliberately made Yi Qianxian an instructor for the students of the Sacred Academy. Thinking of this, the Grand Dean suddenly snorted and didn't say a word. After confirming that the purified celestial jade bone given by Luo Qingtong was correct, Bai Suqing immediately took a deep breath and said to Luo Qingtong, "Little Qingtong, this is really a big deal." "You." She deliberated for a moment and then said to Luo Qingtong, "I have to discuss this with my father. In addition, when the time comes, use Zhu Yi's and my name to announce to the public that you shouldn't interfere. We will sever all ties with you regarding this matter." Bai Suqing said resolutely. This wasn't to take advantage of Luo Qingtong or to take the credit from Luo Qingtong. It was to protect Luo Qingtong. This was a big deal. If it was said that Luo Qingtong had dissolved the violent energy in their bodies, it was still within the scope of medical skills. But the matter of the purified celestial jade bone, anyone who knew about it would want to get a share of it. Even within the Heavenly Yuan sect, there were many disagreements, not to mention the outside world. In the face of absolute benefits, there would definitely be people who would have ideas about Luo Qingtong. Bai Suqing put this matter under her and the dean's name in order to protect Luo Qingtong. Okay. Luo Qingtong smiled and nodded. When she told Bai Suqing about this matter, she already knew that Bai Suqing would make such an arrangement. Although she was not afraid of any threats, it was better to avoid trouble. She appreciated Bai Suqing's arrangement. Then I'll have to trouble mistress. It's no trouble. Bai Suqing heaved a sigh of relief. Then, she smiled at Luo Qingtong and said, "Regarding this matter, our Heavenly Yuan sect has taken advantage of you. Zhu Yi has been unreliable all his life, but today, he is finally reliable for once." Bai Suqing's words made the Grand Supreme Dean's lips twitch. No one would diss themselves like that. In front of the younger generation, did he still want his face? There was a burst of grief in the Grand Supreme Dean's heart. However, he was already a henpecked husband. In front of Bai Suqing, he was a coward. He didn't dare to utter a word. He just kept muttering with his mouth, "Who is unreliable? Who is unreliable? Can I fool you if I'm unreliable?" Luo Qingtong looked at his muttering appearance and found it funny. The Grand Supreme Dean probably didn't know that she could read lips. Should he tell this to Master's wife? Luo Qingtong thought about it seriously. The Grand Supreme Dean still didn't know that he was on the verge of death. He was still muttering. Chapter 1984. With their help, Luo Qingtong was happy and relaxed. She even asked about Su Yu and the others. When the land of the deceased immortals opened, she was going to pick them up and go to the land of the deceased immortals together. After knowing that Su Yu and the others were most likely in the Breeze Pavilion, which had been destroyed by Luo Qingtong, Bai Suqing waved her hand and asked people to support Su Yu and the others in the name of the Sky Yuan sect. In the future, the land in the Breeze Pavilion would belong to Tian Xia openly. Her action would save Su Yu and the others a lot of trouble in the future. At least they didn't have to worry about the forces and sects under the Breeze Pavilion being dissatisfied, saving Su Yu and the others the trouble of making a move. The rest of the time could be used for cultivation. While Bai Suqing and the others were busy dealing with all kinds of things, Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian stayed in the courtyard. Luo Qingtong borrowed many books about the land of the deceased immortals from the Sky Yuan sect's library. Soon, she learned a lot about the land of the deceased immortals, including the valley that the people of the beast-taming King's Valley always went to. Broken Star Valley. Luo Qingtong's lips curved slightly. She closed the book in her hand. It was an open secret that the people of the beast-taming King's Valley always went to the Broken Star Valley every time they entered the land of the deceased immortals. But that place was always heavily surrounded by the people of the beast-taming King's Valley. Other people couldn't enter even if they wanted to. They only knew that it was called the Broken Star Valley. Other than that, they knew nothing about it. They didn't even know what the people of the beast-taming King's Valley were doing. But Luo Qingtong knew. The secret of the fifth beast taming art. Luo Qingtong chuckled. She had a hunch that the fifth beast taming art was the purest part of the beast taming King's Valley's beast taming art. And the previous 4 beast taming arts were all flawed. As long as he could find the 5th incantation, he would be able to make up for the flaws of the first 4 incantations. If she wanted to help the golden-winged great condor and the others break their contracts with the beast taming King's Valley, the key point should be the 5th beast taming art. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes. Once she found the 5th beast taming incantation, she would return the grudge of the beast taming King's Valley, as well as Luo Jinghong's, to the beast taming King's Valley. Time passed quickly. After Luo Qingtong had stayed in the Sky Yuan sect for almost half a month, an extremely bright light suddenly erupted from the place where the fallen immortals were. Then, the aura on the other side began to vibrate. Rumble. Following the vibrations of those auras, the black mist that shrouded the land of the fallen immortals began to shrink and fade. The ferocious yin qi in the surroundings also began to weaken under this violent tremor. Little girl Qingtong. Bai Suqing and Grand Supreme Dean appeared in Luo Qingtong's courtyard. They were followed by a group of disciples of the Sky Yuan sect. "We can go to the land of the fallen immortals now," she said to Luo Qingtong. Bai Suqing was dressed in a light green robe today. She was full of heroic spirit and didn't lose her gentle beauty. The aura around her body was even more solid than when she broke through previously. Obviously, during this period of time, someone helped her to consolidate her strength. Otherwise, with Bai Suqing's body that had just recovered, it was impossible for her to consolidate her strength so quickly. Chapter 1985. Sure enough, just as Luo Qingtong was thinking, Bai Suqing said, "My father has come out of seclusion and wants to see you." Luo Qingtong, don't be nervous. My father is very easy to talk to. In addition, we will also announce the fact that you can purify the power of the immortal jade bone today. Of course, we will hide your information and use Zhu Yi's and my name to replace it. Bai Suqing said to Luo Qingtong. Okay. Luo Qingtong nodded. Bai Suqing had already told her about this before. She did not have any objections. Okay. In addition, I have already sent people to pick up your subordinates. Don't worry. I have sent them to my father's trusted subordinates. Bai Suqing smiled. She already knew that Luo Qingtong had been given a hard time by those people sent by the Sky Yuan sect. It was not Luo Qingtong who told her, but she found out by herself. Those people were sent by Chen Tong to humiliate Luo Qingtong. He did not want Luo Qingtong to go up the mountain in the first place, so they were naturally arrogant. Those people who were going to pick up Suyu were personally arranged by Bai Suqing, so there would not be any mistakes. The group of people chatted as they walked toward the main sect meeting hall of the Sky Yuan sect. As for the elders of the Heavenly Yuan sect, they were already waiting there. The sect master of the Sky Yuan sect sat at the top of the hall. When he saw Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian, he immediately nodded slightly at Luo Qingtong. Then, out of the intuition of an expert, he subconsciously glanced at Yi Qianxian. The latter's handsome face was hidden behind a dark golden mask. His face was expressionless, and he did not look at the people present. He just sat beside Luo Qingtong with Bai Suqing. After the Heaven Branch sect master glanced at Yi Qianren, he was unable to see through Yi Qianren's cultivation level due to his own cultivation level. Just like Bai Suqing, he thought that Yi Qianxian and Luo Qingtong were the same students of the Grand Supreme Dean. It was just that his cultivation was low and he couldn't see through it. Therefore, he didn't pay attention to Yi Qianxian anymore. He looked at Luo Qingtong and asked, "Miss Luo, do you mind if I call you Qingtong?" His expression was gentle, and he looked at Luo Qingtong like an elder. This was because he had watched the Grand Supreme Dean grow up. To the sect master of the Tian Yuan sect, the students of the Great Chief were no different from his descendants. Luo Qingtong looked at him and smiled. Yes, Sect Master. She nodded at the Sect Master of the Tian Yuan sect in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. This attitude instantly attracted the attention of the elders of the Sky Yuan sect. Previously, when Luo Qingtong criticized Chen Tong in front of them, she was not so magnanimous. As the crowd thought so, they suddenly thought that Luo Qingtong did this on purpose to deal with Chen Tong. The latter was so angry that his eyes turned red. Chen Tong was also among the elders at this time. This was a major event of the Tian Yuan sect, and it was impossible for him not to be present. At this time, his expression was very bad. He looked at Luo Qingtong and the others with gritted teeth. Especially when he looked at the Grand Supreme Dean, he was so angry that his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. After Chen Tong fainted, he was carried back to his place, but he had not fulfilled the promise he owed. The Grand Supreme Dean went to his place every day to find him and make him fulfill his promise. Chapter 1986. Moreover, in order to embarrass Luo Qingtong and the others, he had used his spiritual energy to amplify his voice so that everyone within a few hundred meters could hear him clearly. Under such circumstances, how could Chen Tong conceal it? He had no choice but to do as the Grand Supreme Dean said. Immediately, the news of Elder Chen Tong crawling on the ground like a dog and crawling around the Sky Yuan sect spread like wildfire in the Sky Yuan sect. Chen Tong's reputation was completely ruined. The Grand Supreme Dean was reinstated as the first disciple of the Sky Yuan sect under the request of the elders. Hearing this news, Chen Tong was so angry that he trembled and vomited 3 liters of blood. He had been lying in his room for nearly half a month. When he heard that the aura of the land of the deceased immortals had weakened and that it was about to open, he got up and went to the land of the deceased immortals. He had lost the initiative in the previous matter and could not miss the opening of the land of the deceased immortals again. Otherwise, if the Grand Supreme Dean and the others obtained any opportunities, he would really be finished. Among them, Luo Qingtong was the one that Chen Tong hated more than the Grand Supreme Dean. If it were not for her, the Grand Supreme Dean would not have had such an easy time under his scheme. Not to mention being able to suppress him. However, who would have thought that one wrong step would lead to another wrong step after step? He had underestimated Luo Qingtong and was humiliated by her until he could not turn the tables. Chen Tong was furious. However, Luo Qingtong was the one who could heal Bai Suqing's injuries. A group of Heavenly Yuan sect's elders protected her. They even gave her the honorary guest elder token that Bai Suqing had requested. He could not do anything to her at all. His status as an elder of the Sky Yuan sect did not have the slightest advantage in front of her. Thinking of this, Chen Tong was even more furious. And when he found out that Luo Qingtong most likely had the intention to offend him back then, the anger and resentment in his heart soared to the sky. *TCH. He clenched his fists tightly and looked at Luo Qingtong with bloodshot eyes. He was so angry that he panted heavily. Luo Qingtong could not be bothered with him. Chen Tong was no longer a threat to her. It wasn't easy to make a move in the Sky Yuan sect. Once they entered the land of the fallen immortals, she would have plenty of ways to deal with him. Chen Tong also had the same idea. The honorary guest elder token could at most protect Luo Qingtong for a while. When they entered the land of the deceased immortals, they would be surrounded by dangers and he would have plenty of opportunities to kill her. Hold it in. Chen Tong's heart was filled with hatred. He forcefully suppressed the anger in his eyes and lowered his head. At this moment, Luo Qingtong had already told the Tian Yuan sect master about her ability to neutralize the mysterious power in the Forbidden Zone. When Luo Qingtong healed Bai Suqing's injuries, the elders had already guessed it in their hearts. Hearing this, they were immediately excited. However, when Luo Qingtong said that the recovery and growth of Bai Suqing's strength was not caused by her, everyone was a little disappointed. After all, if Luo Qingtong could really achieve this, then the Forbidden Zone would no longer be a forbidden zone in the future. On the contrary, it would become a place for them to train and temper themselves. However, their disappointment did not last long because Bai Suqing said that she could purify the celestial jade bone. In an instant, the group of Heavenly Yuan sect elders stood up abruptly. Suqing, you have to know that this is a big deal. Don't joke around. Chapter 1987. Don't worry, Elder Mu. Bai Suqing looked at him with a smile and said, this is indeed true. As she spoke, she took out the immortal jade bones that Luo Qingtong had purified for them during this period of time. Seeing that the celestial jade bones were sparkling and translucent without any impurities, the elders of the Heavenly Yuan sect all sucked in a deep breath. No one doubted Bai Suqing's words anymore. Everyone looked at the purified immortal jade bones with ecstasy. Such pure and translucent energy could be directly absorbed to enhance one's strength. If Bai Suqing and Zhu Yi had discovered this secret, wouldn't it mean that the strength of the Sky Yuan sect would be greatly enhanced? The Grand Supreme Dean and Bai Suqing had concealed the matter regarding Luo Qingtong and only said that they had discovered this secret by chance. The people of the Breeze Pavilion were dead, and the 3 guardians of the Celestial Palace were also not present. No one would know that what they had said was false. The elders of the Sky Yuan sect all believed it. At this point, they were firmly on the side of the Grand Supreme Dean and Bai Suqing. As for Chen Tong, he almost collapsed to the ground. He was still plotting how to regain the position of the chief disciple of the Sky Yuan sect. Now, he had suffered such a strong blow. Now that the Grand Supreme Dean and Bai Suqing had such a secret, how could he have a chance to be promoted in the Sky Yuan sect in the future? Chen Tong's heart turned cold. But soon, he pulled himself together again. No, there was still one last chance. This time, there were traces of the treasure map in the land of the fallen immortals. As long as he could obtain the legendary treasure and the divine beast's acknowledgement in the land of the fallen immortals, not to mention the Sky Yuan sect, even the entire hidden world would respect him. At that time, in the entire hidden world, only the people of the Star Alliance Palace could make him slightly wary. At that time, he wanted the Grand Supreme Dean, Bai Suqing, and Luo Qingtong to die miserably. Chen Tong thought viciously. After the initial ecstasy, the elders of the Sky Yuan sect also thought of the location of the forbidden area. Their strength required the power of higher-grade immortal jade bones in order to be able to increase. That kind of immortal jade bone could only be found in that forbidden area. Only once in a while would 1 or 2 of them reach the periphery. But now, because of Luo Qingtong, they could enter the forbidden area without worrying about suffering such terrible injuries. Even if they didn't obtain any treasures after entering, just the immortal jade bones alone were enough to make one's eyes go red with envy. Besides them, no one else knew about all of this. As the crowd thought about it, they became even more ecstatic. They looked at Luo Qingtong, the Grand Supreme Dean and the others with even more satisfaction. Even when Bai Suqing suggested that Luo Qingtong's team should join their Sky Yuan sect, no one objected. As for Chen Tong, he wanted to object, but was there anyone willing to listen to him? He could only stand aside and watch the elders of the Sky Yuan sect, Luo Qingtong, the Grand Supreme Dean, and the others talk and laugh. The jealousy and hatred in his eyes were almost mixed with poison. After everything was settled, the Sky Yuan sect master immediately announced the departure of the Sky Yuan sect's team. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.